Soul, check it out now. The Funk Soul Brother right about now. The Funk Soul Brother, check it out now. The Funk Soul Brother right about now.
Love slots? The DraftKings.
Love slots? I'm Kevin Hart.
This video is sponsored by War Thunder. The year is 2013. 2 years since Skyrim. 5 years since Bethesda's last Fallout. And we'd heard nothing. Fans are starved. Ravenous for anything at this point, they scramble for any scraps they could find. Voice actors' tweets, employee leaks, Bethesda staff sightings. They'd take anything. But on the 14th of November 2013, a website appears online, thesurvivor2299.com. On it, Fallout's Vault-Tec logo and a countdown to December 11th. That was just 4 days after the Game Awards, where Skyrim was announced 3 years ago. Fans dig through the online directory, and its publisher, ZeniMax Media. Still, some are skeptical, but then 3 days later, ZeniMax Media actually files the trademark for Fallout 4 in Europe. They'd also said nothing about the website. If it wasn't legit, surely they'd just come out and say so. This could only mean one thing. The next Fallout was here. Bethesda hadn't abandoned us. They were finally throwing a bone to the little guy. And fan speculation goes wild. Then comes the Morse codes. Then the Caesar shift cryptography. Then the Visioneer ciphers. Fans are sat at home in their pants for hours deciphering them. They even find a working phone number on the website, which leads to more codes. Some of these codes reference an actual radio frequency in Massachusetts, which sounds like this. Bethesda's YouTube channel is even linked in the source code of the website. This was serious stuff. Bethesda had gone above and beyond with the viral marketing here. Every gaming outlet is talking about it, and there's even Facebook pages and YouTube channels with daily updates monitoring it. The subreddit watching the website's every move. The 6th of December 2013, almost 2 weeks of code cracking, and fatigue is beginning to set in. But it's now just 1 day before the Game Awards, and 5 days before the countdown ends. The hype is tangible. And Todd and the boys hit us with this tweet. What? It's gotta be a joke. Some sort of sick joke. But then fans boot up the website, and my god. Gone was the timer, the Vault-Tec logo. All that was left, a Rickroll hosted on a server somewhere in Poland. A dark day. 3 weeks of speculation and hype, countless videos on YouTube, and dozens of hours of people's lives spent cracking random ciphers and lining up rivers on Google Maps. For absolutely nothing. Naturally, they're not pleased. The guy behind the website does an AMA on Reddit, and is vilified by the community instantly. We hear nothing else about Fallout for a while, and Fallout fans return to the darkness. June the 2nd, 2015, another Fallout-themed countdown timer appears. We'd been burned before. Turn it off. But turns out, this time, it's actually real. And on June the 3rd, it's nearing the end. And finally, after years of anticipation, Fallout 4's announcement trailer is actually upon us. June the 14th. It's E3, and Bethesda Game Studios is holding their first full press conference. Todd strolls out on stage again, confidence radiating. He's met with thunderous applause. Again, the claims are bold.
All of this just works. And again, it just works.
Hold on. Is that the release date? That's just 5 months away. But first, look to the skies. By God, it's thundering time. Bethesda let Obsidian Entertainment, a California
Place to put an ad. Fuck you.
Obsidian Entertainment, a Californian development team with several key people from Fallout's original dev team, take the wheel and crank out a Fallout 3 spin-off based on their original plan for Fallout 3 back in 2004. With only 18 months to get the game out the door, they got to work immediately, and in 2010, Fallout New Vegas was released. Wait, was that traits from the first games? Joinable factions? An in-depth reputation system?
I hate the air that you breathe!
And actual skill and attribute checks in dialogue and out in the world?
Man, I can't wait to see the look on his face.
Also, the writing here is actually good. The world? Pretty deeply thought out, with multiple factions at play, an interesting conflict, and actual player choice. The characters are also well written, and if you don't like someone, that's fine, because this is always an option. Then there's almost every chain of side quests in the game affecting the main story and the ending slideshow. There are actually hundreds of endings here. We were looking at a 3D Fallout game with actual RPG mechanics and good writing here. In fact, the game had fixed almost everything wrong with Fallout 3, and it was phenomenal. Obsidian even had to work around the crusty Gamebryo engine code, with all the issues that came with it. For instance, if anything in the game is voiced, there has to be a character to actually voice it. This leads to characters in the game like Ron the narrator, Bill the tax collector, and Testicles the debug centurion. The ending slideshow is also an actual in-game slideshow your character's locked into looking at, with Ron the narrator behind it. Anyway, due to the engine, the short development time they'd been given, and the colossal 500 megabytes of RAM they'd had to work with console show your character's locked into looking at, with Ron the narrator behind it. Anyway, due to the engine, the short development time they'd been given, and the colossal 500 megabytes of RAM they'd had to work with consoles, the big plans they had for the city had to be trimmed considerably. But 18 months in, and Obsidian had made one of the best role-playing games of all time. However, because it's so jam-packed and was made in such a short time, it has a rough start. It's horrifically buggy and horribly optimized on release, almost unplayable in some cases. There's literally a bug where you can't enter the main strip of New Vegas without wearing the old cowboy hat. The bugs are eventually patched, but because of its release date, New Vegas receives 84 points on Metacritic. That was just 1 point short for the bonus Bethesda would have given them, as per the contract. As a result, layoffs at Obsidian, and around 20 to 30 people have vanished. Nefarious theories about Bethesda begin to float. Some fans even suggest
Game was rigged from the start.
Obsidian would go on to pitch a Fallout New Vegas 2, and a similar spin-off with Elder Scrolls. A guaranteed cash cow for both parties. But this time, Bethesda says no. And that was the end of it. Fallout 4, probably the most hyped game of 2015. It had been half a decade since we'd last heard anything at all from the franchise, so people are naturally quite excited to jump back in. And on the 10th of November 2015, the game is out the door. The reviews, amazing. 9.5 out of 10 IGN. YouTubers are even calling it near perfect. However, when people actually get their hands on the game, they dig in. And it's neither of those things. During development, Bethesda had looked at Fallout 3's gunplay. Yeah, not really up to standards, boys. So they pulled some programmers from id, who were developing Doom at the time, to help them make actual, functional FPS combat. And as a result, the gameplay here, a lot better. The gun modification system from New Vegas is back, and it's heavily expanded. It's actually very good here, and utilizes the horde of absolute shit you amass while playing the game. Also, more voice actors. So now every third NPC in the game no longer sounds the exact same. Plus, a few other elements of Fallout 4 had clearly taken some inspiration from New Vegas. This game actually has joinable factions, and they play a big role in the resolution of the main storyline, an improvement. Companions are also a lot better than 3's. They have personalities here, and even their own quests too, like in New Vegas. They now also like or dislike certain actions you do, depending on said personality. There's now a sprint button, and that new power armor, pretty cool. However, that's generally where the good ends. See, after a bumpy start, Fallout fans had come to love New Vegas, one of the best RPGs of all time, some even claim. And so, as a following game in the same franchise, some people expected Fallout 4 to improve, maybe even build upon it. No. Todd Howard is, at this point, a legendary game designer, a 4-time world champion. His ideas were groundbreaking. He couldn't be caged, and his process was not changing for this game. He, and Bethesda as a whole, could do no wrong. This was going to be another smash hit regardless. Game of the Year was essentially coded in. And so again, simplification. The character system in Fallout 3, far too confusing. Special attributes, perks, and skill, complete. So they removed skills entirely, and merged them into perks and attributes. Traits are still nowhere to be found.
Yep. And people get upset when I point these things out and be like, these are basic criticisms of Fallout 4. It's like, no, these are valid criticisms.
Perks and attributes. Traits are still nowhere to be found. The speech. See, half the charm of the old Fallouts are the branching effects of dialogue. The various quest lines and scraps of information you can wrangle from people using only the gift of the gab.
Who is it? What? I should kick your fucking ass. Who is this?
So for Fallout 4, Emil and the rest of Bethesda's crack writing team sit down. What Fallout really needs is an emotional story, boys. Also, Todd's been quite blatantly gunning for a more mainstream crowd for over a decade now, and no one in the general public can really read anymore due to brain rot. So let's kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and go for a voiced protagonist. What they didn't see coming, they couldn't possibly have predicted, was that voicing every single line of dialogue your character says in the game 2 times.
I'm a Barbie girl in a Barbie world.
I am Barbie girl, I said.
Is a bit expensive and quite time consuming. So Todd and the team do what they do best. Streamline. That old iconic speech system? Get rid of it. That Mass Effect game is pretty good. Let's use theirs. Let's also lock the player down to 4 speech options at all times. And let's not even allow them to see what those options are. Brilliant. This results in a ton of speech options being quite deceiving.
Shut up and sit down, you big bald fuck.
And because writing is hard, let's just boil every speech option down to yes, sarcastic yes, maybe yes, and no, but actually yes. 2 of the first and most popular mods to come out removes the voiceovers entirely and actually shows you what you're saying, and this problem becomes quite plain to see. Skills are gone, and as a result, skill speech checks and dialogue gone too. Special attribute speech checks too. There are charisma speech checks in the game.
I don't believe you.
But they rarely result in anything other than
Now,
give me money.
All right. 200. 150.
The protagonist's voice lines, which caused half the issues here, make up for around 25% of the game's dialogue data and script. That's about 26,000 lines. All of this time and expense on a feature which fans hate and actively makes the game significantly worse. Brilliant. At least the dialogue's well written.
If you're here to talk me into working on Liberty Prime, you can forget it.
Do I need to remind you why you made that promise in the first place?
No, that won't be necessary. Tell Proctor Ingram to get her scribes ready.
Then there's the karma system.
If you're here to talk me into working on Liberty Prime, you can forget it.
Do I need to remind you why you made that promise in the first place?
No, that won't be necessary. Tell Proctor Ingram to get her scribes ready.
Then there's the karma system, which they'd gotten rid of. The faction system. But instead of the varied reputations like we've gotten in New Vegas, you're basically either with someone or against them. The skill and attribute checks they had out in the world in Fallout 3, basically nowhere to be found. They did put a couple in there though, just enough to remind us that they could have done it, but didn't. Far fewer evil character options, weapon durability's gone. The new, worse, layered armor system, holstered weapons are no longer visible. And the ending slideshow is not even gimped. It's just completely non-existent here. The game ends on essentially the exact same cutscene for all 4 endings.
Playing every hour on every channel.
For Fallout 4, Todd also doubled down on the procedural stuff again, and attempted to make the game infinitely replayable. And to do this, they'd cooked up the settlement system.
It's done.
A base building framework that allows you to construct your own towns across the map and establish trade routes between them. Sounds great. But again, there are issues. The entire interface for base building is from the perspective of the player, limiting and obstructing camera angles, making construction a nightmare. There's also a ton of building and trash in the way that you can't stack and have to build around. Again, a nightmare. Not a fan of the system? Unlucky. Because this mechanic is pretty much unavoidable. Elements are mandatory in the main quest, and one of the 4 factions' quest lines completely revolves around it. However, a benefit. Due to this new settlement system,
All of this just works.
players can now build their own settlement. No need for Bethesda to even bother. As a result, the game is majorly lacking in actual towns. Morrowind had something like 21 towns. Fallout 3 had about 15 proper settlements. New Vegas around 15 too. Fallout 4, 5 years later, somewhere around 7. The main city is also quite underwhelming. Less settlements equals less quests. And surprise, surprise, Fallout 4 is lacking here too. It has less than Skyrim, a game that came out 4 years earlier. Missing the towns and quests our old games had an abundance of? Well, here's a tiny hovel next to a lake for you to do up yourself. There are around 30 of these potential settlements, and Bethesda uses these to pad out the game's lack of content via more radiant quests. See, there's a man in the game called Preston Garvey, and he's about to become your worst nightmare. Prepare to hear this every time you speak to the man for the rest of the game. Naturally, the character is widely hated.
I'll mark it on your map.
But turns out, he's essential. 10,000 people download a mod solely dedicated to killing him. There's also a mod that just stops him giving out quests in an attempt to make him more tolerable. It has around 50,000 downloads. Others turn to alternative ways of doing it. Settlements are also just kind of pointless.
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
They have no impact on the main quest, and most of the actual settlers are just basic, randomly generated NPCs. You get money and items from establishing trade routes, but at the end of the game, you're pretty much drowning in all of that anyway. But Todd wasn't finished with the procedural stuff just yet. In New Vegas, there were a ton of unique weapons. These had unique effects and actually looked unique. In 3, most uniques had unique effects, but looked exactly the same as their default. In 4, due to the new procedural legendary weapon system, any gun can now basically have any effect, meaning no weapons here actually feel unique. The same goes for armor. When it comes down to the amount of actual content in the game, disappointment here too. Cut content, par for the course for Bethesda games, but it's never been more apparent. The map is densely populated like Skyrim, with a ton of interesting locations. The issue is, they all essentially end up just being a nice little backdrop to murder people in. Oh cool, a town made out of old boat, barge and ship parts. It's just a bunch of raiders you have to kill. A gladiator-style arena in the middle of downtown Boston. Just a bunch of raiders to kill, with no reason to ever return. Fallout 4 is barely even attempting to be an RPG anymore. It's a sandbox, base-building, looter-shooter, action exploration game. In 3, Bethesda had absolutely nailed the atmosphere. It's pretty much unanimously praised. So in 4, they change it completely. The gloomy, gritty, post-apocalyptic vibes of 3 turn into bright, colourful, and hopeful in Fallout 4. The music too. Also, for a AAA game in 2015, the graphics are not great. Stiff animations, and pretty horrific textures across the board. The super mutants look especially bad. Compared to The Witcher 3 the same year, yeah, not great. Despite the bad graphics, the game runs terribly. Fallout 4 also features an art style change that in a lot of cases does the game no favours. Some weapons look weird, tools look worse, and super mutants go from deformed, hunched over mutants to just large green men. We don't talk about the synth armor. Also, is that gunbolt on the wrong side? The writing. Again, Emil is back as head writer, and as a result, we're served an absolute masterclass of storytelling. We emerge from a vault, looking for an immediate family member. Again. The big silver people, they're back, and central to the storyline. Again. Look, Giant Robot Man finale. Again. Wow. Also, you've just left the vault with the sole mission of finding your only child, who's just been ripped from the clutches of your lifeless spouse, only to immediately get sidetracked by Steve down the road, who needs some help building a shed. Not too long after the game comes out, Emil does a talk where he explains his writing method. It's controversial.
Keep it simple, stupid. This is what happens at Bethesda. When you write the main story of a game, we're going to write the great American novel. It's going to be this thick.
Keep it simple, stupid.
And you're going to give this book, this great American novel, to the player. And what are they going to do with it? They're going to rip out every page and make paper airplanes out of them. And they're never going to see your story. They are going to spend 30 hours making shacks. This is who we're making the game for. That's not the end of being a video game developer. Because the true mark of being a real developer is waiting to come in. And then reading the reviews, of course, and hopefully, if you get lucky, ignoring the reviews.
Then there's the design of the game. Emil is head of that too. See, lead designers of a game usually have this thing called a design document. This is available to everyone on the team and sets out pretty much everything the game is trying to achieve, keeping everyone on the same page at all times. New people join the company midway through development, just send them the design doc, and they'll be up to speed. Design docs are usually constantly updated throughout development, so if something changes, it'll be reflected on the document. But turns out, the lead designer is not a fan. Design docs take a bit of time to keep up to date, and it's just a bit too much effort. So for Fallout 4, he basically just scraps it, apparently resorting to a few smaller ones for specific areas of development. Now, Bethesda games are not small projects. Their studios consists of hundreds of people, collaborating across multiple countries.
We don't give two shits about how technology works, because all we care about is getting rich.
And now they're going about this without a cohesive, shared document. Doesn't sound ideal.
Not a great plan.
He receives a ton of backlash for this, and later walks it back in a tweet. And of course, the bugs are numerous. And incredibly basic things are still missing. There's still ultra-wide support, or even an FOV slider, even though you can easily change it by modifying the INI file. This is on a PC in the year 2015. The INI file. This is on a PC in the year 2015. But of course, Bethesda knows their fanbase will clean it all up for them, so it's all good. When Fallout 4 first released in November 2015, Todd and the boys offered a season pass for $30, including access to all future DLC content. At the time, the scope of the DLC isn't public knowledge, but the last two Fallouts had a clear formula of 4 to 5 decently sized story expansions, with new locations, quests, weapons, and enemies. So people expect something similar here. Bethesda had also stated that the season pass would be worth at least $40 in total. Pretty sweet deal. February 2016, and Bethesda has an announcement. They've expanded their original vision for 4's DLC.
Are you with me?
And the season pass price is getting bumped up to $50 in March. If you hadn't already, you better get that season pass now. They released their first expansion that same month, and it's a small questline with a character from Fallout 3, as well as a new robot building system. So right, I guess? April 2016, and DLC 2 is released, Wasteland Workshop. This is basically just a few more things you can craft for your settlement, and some arena fighting. Okay. May 2016, and we get the first proper expansion, Bar Harbor, and this is actually decent. Bethesda had clearly taken in some feedback here, because it includes actual RPG elements and is decently written. Let's just ignore that one quest there. They then released 2 more Workshop DLCs, exciting stuff. Then the second full expansion, Nuka World, releases in August. Again, this expansion is good. The Season Pass was shaping up to be a pretty good buy. Wait, this was the last DLC? So that was 2 actual expansions, a small quest line, and then some tiny crafting DLC. Fans are pretty pissed.
People will buy anything. That doesn't mean...
Despite the issues, the game sells insanely well. Todd had done it again. And Fallout goes mainstream. Mass appeal. And hundreds of millions are conjured yet again. Todd gets suited and booted, and heads to the Game Awards. Ready to sweep up yet again. But once he gets there, something feels different. The atmosphere. It's off. Todd has some white wine, and dips into the salmon pinwheel. It's fine. It's probably nothing. And the lights dim, and there it is. Best RPG.
The best RPG. The winner is The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt.
What?
Worth it.
Developer of the Year.
For Developer of the Year goes to CD Projekt Red.
What? Game of the Year.
And the winner for Game of the Year 2015 is The Witcher 3.
What? Outrage. Todd Howard snubbed. He leaves and gets cracking on his next game. This thing was going to be a masterpiece. The consistent regression of their games, definitely noted. But Bethesda still has a generally tremendous reputation. In a market currently setting its sights exclusively on your mother's credit card.
Hello?
Hello?
Hello.
Good evening, sir. I'm calling from your credit card component.
Bethesda had stuck it out, remained single player, and actively avoided egregious monetization. Mostly. One of the few decent gaming companies left. But around 2016, and even this begins to change. In October, Bethesda Softworks decides to make a controversial change. See, game reviewers typically get sent out review copies a few days or even weeks before games come out. This is so they have enough time to actually play the game before writing an entire review on it for launch day. For longer, single-player games like the ones Bethesda Softworks publish, this is pretty important. But Bethesda now reckons, nah, let's just send review copies out one day before launch. So, everyone, including those in the media, get to experience our games at the same time. Definitely not to sweep glitches and issues with the games under the rug until everyone had already bought the game. This is obviously quite controversial, and after releasing a couple of games under this, they backpedal. Also, around the same time, a tiny indie developer is developing a small game called Pray for the Gods. ZeniMax hears about this and comes knocking. Nice name you got there, pal. But turns out, we already have a game with the word pray in the title. Nothing personal, kid. They're forced to change the name. A few years before that, Mojang was making a game called Scrolls. ZeniMax had come knocking down too. Same result. Also in 2016, Todd has a surprise for us. It had been 2 years since Fallout 4, and players are starting to get hungry once more. And lucky for us, Todd and the boys had something in store. Another edition of Skyrim. That was on top of Skyrim Legendary Edition back in 2013, Skyrim VR Edition, which would release in 2017, and Skyrim Nintendo Switch Edition shortly after that. Fans are overjoyed. That's not all. The Special Edition replaces the original Skyrim listing on Steam. It also changes the game from 32-bit to 64-bit, meaning every single mod is now automatically broken and needs updating. It's not all bad. They announce mods on consoles. They also announce paid mods for all platforms. The Creation Club. It was simple. Slide some cash over to modders to create a mod that probably already exists on the Nexus for free. Create their own currency with predatory pricing models. And then sell these mods to players through it. The first few creations are simply jaw-dropping. An $8 Chinese stealth suit, pretty much identical to the one in the base game of Fallout 3, for free, and also currently available on the Nexus, for free.
For free.
And look, horse armor again. Brilliant. 2018. It's rumored that Todd is working on a massive, brand new IP. Their first in 25 years, called Starfield. So naturally, we're probably not going to hear much from him for a while. But then, on May the 29th, another countdown appears. This time on Bethesda's own Twitch. On it, the words, "Please stand by." My god, it's happening again.
Hey, it's happening! Everybody stay calm!
What's the procedure, everyone? What's the procedure?
Stay calm!
And then, there he is.
Have we waited long enough, guys?
Wait, what was this? It was only 3 years since the last Fallout. Could this be the massively anticipated New Vegas sequel? Perhaps Fallout 5 skipped the queue. Speculation goes wild.
Everything on this wall is connected.
Regardless, the next day, the countdown drizzles down to 0, and the world sees the next Fallout for the very first time. Excitement, although people still don't really know what it is they're excited for. June 10th, it's E3. Todd charges on stage, and we get some actual details of the game.
Fallout 76 is entirely online. All new rendering, lighting, and landscape technology. It is 4 times the size of Fallout 4. 16 times the detail. Of course you can play this solo. You'll never even see a server when you play.
This all sounded brilliant. An online PvP base building survival game. The collector's edition looks promising too.
And it also comes with a Fallout collectible that really I've always wanted, so we made them for everybody to buy, and here it is.
Okay, no. But we do get a helmet, a map,
That glows in the f***ing dark.
and some army figures, alongside a canvas bag. It's also the perfect time to tease Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6, 2 games that are around 5 and 10 years out from launch respectively. But anyway, this thing's coming out on November the 14th, and that was just 5 months away. Bethesda had held a beta a couple of weeks before launch for people who'd pre-ordered the game, and things start out rough. By this point, Bethesda weren't exactly known for the structural integrity of their software, and they'd decided to launch the game exclusively on their brand new Bethesda launcher, made in-house by Bethesda's best. Just go to their website, download it, slurp up the 45 gigabytes of game files, and in around a week's time when the beta's unlocked, just hit play. Simple enough. And players do exactly this, but turns out, for some, upon pressing the play, the launcher deletes the entire game instantly. Bethesda releases an emergency statement telling players to stay calm and not to touch anything. They're working on it. And then promptly deletes the tweet. Things are off to a good start. Also, the YouTubers. Uploading videos. They're not good. They say the game is running horrifically.
I couldn't get the game to run smoothly. I had tons of FPS issues and tons of stutters.
Even on NASA tier PCs, and that bugs are everywhere. But fans disagree. The dislikes come in hard and fast. Bethesda would obviously fix everything before release. This is a beta after all.
Right.
However, this is a beta about 3 weeks out from launch. Fans close YouTube and head over to Twitch, where Rick and Morty are streaming the game.
I know I'm naked, but just come help me out. No funny business.
Everything was gonna be okay. 14th of November, 2018, and the world is blessed with Fallout 76. And after downloading a day 1 patch bigger than the game itself, players boot up and step out into what would be
An untamed and very different wasteland.
Todd had made some grand promises, and the follow-through was nothing short of incredible. Voluptuous size, and the detail, simply eye-watering. However, Fallout 76's development was handed to a newer, relatively inexperienced Bethesda team in Austin, with the main Bethesda Maryland just designing and overlooking the development of the game. And turns out, this new team decided to forego bug testing entirely, and on launch, Christ.
Oh my god!
There are frozen enemies,
It's a glitch!
flying enemies, invisible enemies,
hello?
Naked enemies, upside down naked enemies, invincible players,
Shot. Or not. I could get the damage button.
pop-ins, rendering issues,
16 times the detail.
random god rays, T-poses, server crashes,
Hey, bye-bye, bitch. Told you.
and Muscle Man.
What the
Animations are also off. There's a ton of exploits, and so much more.
What the is going on?
The year is also 2018, and Bethesda's newest AAA game is capped at 60 frames per second, even on PC. Naturally, players are quite annoyed, so they dig into the game files and start tinkering. And in a mere few minutes, they figure out a simple fix. However, turns out the cap's there for a reason, because turn it off, and time and space itself speeds up and destabilizes. This is because the game world's physics are actually tied to the frame rate of the game. Head over 100, and your character becomes the Flash. This bug has been in Bethesda's engine code dating back to Morrowind, and it's one of the many bugs modders have repeatedly fixed on their own, almost instantly after release, only for every following game to reintroduce it. There's also still no FOV slider,
I keep getting away with it!
so PC players dig into the game files again and do it themselves. But turns out, the UI is tied to the field of view here. Change this, and the UI elements are just gone. Push to talk? Sorry, not this time. Proximity chat is either permanently off or always on, the latter by default, meaning you'll be hearing the cries of children and screams of mothers in the distance fairly often.
Somebody not know how to flush the toilet after they've had a shit? Well, it was fucking one of you. Disgusting!
There's also no text chat, and on PC, you can barely remap the horrific controls. The game itself, also quite lacking. As was now well established, bug fixes and patches for Bethesda games had been outsourced to modders for free. But for Fallout 76, Todd decided to outsource the actual content too.
My personal favorite part of Fallout 76 is when they create their own fun.
See, Bethesda had so much of their team working on the detail,
16 times the detail.
that developing actual things to do in interactable NPCs simply not possible. And the game features absolutely no human characters, only other players. But it's alright, other players will take the place of NPCs, Todd reassures us. With no NPCs in the game, naturally, the quests are terrible. The main quest line basically boils down to following the trail of someone's vlogs across the map. Okay, at least there's the side quests, stuff like find Steve. Oh, Steve's dead. Thank God he left his TikTok behind for us to watch.
The war is over.
You are out of uniform, soldier! Where is your power armor? That suit is gonna come out of your pay! Now get out of my face and don't come back until you look like a soldier!
Fantastic. The game features PvP, but the PvP is horrific. Instead of simply adding PvP and PvE servers, Todd attempts to toe a tight middle ground, and makes it so two players have to shoot each other before either can do any actual damage. Shoot someone that hasn't shot you back yet, and you may as well be shooting blanks. And the graphics, still not great.
Beautiful, stunning, 2018. Ah, magnifique.
It's not all bad. There are some cool things here, like dropping nukes. But drop more than one at a time, and the servers will implode.
You'll never even see a server when you play.
The launch codes are also the same for every server, and change once a week. Just spent countless hours getting all 8 pieces. you could have just Googled them. The building is alright, but the build limit is extremely restricted, and all you can really do is build crafting stations, a bed, and storage.
Please don't tell anyone how I live.
Storage that is, again, extremely restricted. They end up raising it by 50% after a huge number of complaints, but they say they can't do any more due to server performance issues. So the game itself, not smooth. But the one thing that does work perfectly on launch is the new in-game shop, the Atomic Shop. Come in and browse such luxuries as a set of power armor with some paint slapped on for just $20. Deal.
Are you f***ing serious?
Do you like $7 digital fridges? Do you like the outfits you got for free in our last game? Great, come in and spend some money. Naturally, at first, there are pay-to-win concerns around this store. But Todd comes out. It's alright. You can earn the currency in-game, the purchases would fund the upcoming free expansions for the game, and most assuring of all, the Atomic Shop is and would stay cosmetic only, so that PvP would stay completely balanced and fair. We're definitely not asset flipping Fallout 4 and selling it back to you for dozens of dollars, and there are absolutely no fake discounts and law-breaking price schemes. Nice. Time to get spending. Naturally, the game doesn't make it a few days before discounts appear. The game starts at $60. Within just 1 week, a third of that is nixed. 50% sales not long after that. Alongside the discounts, hordes of fans had been requesting refunds. Initially, Bethesda had given in, but now, no more. Some people had even promised them, only to have Bethesda backtrack the next day. See, if this was on Steam, they'd have to give the green light for these. But here's the thing, it's on that old launcher of theirs. Check and mate. But then come murmurs of a class action lawsuit, and they backtrack immediately. So the game is absolutely horrendous, and naturally, the sales are too. Also, no Game Awards, not even a nomination, and a whopping 2.6 on Metacritic. Right boys, should probably do something here. They can't rely on modders to fix the game this time round, so Bethesda gets to work on actual patches.
Yeah, they have no choice but to fix the game they fucking couldn't fix to begin with.
Sliding into his morning commute. Cool, calm, collected.
Time round, so Bethesda gets to work on actual patches, and after a few months, Fallout 76 slowly morphs into something resembling a playable game. Also, the boys in Bethesda's R&D department had been working round the clock. And by the end of 2018, was that an FOV slider? Widescreen? Even push to talk? What was happening? Despite the progress, there are some bugs they just can't quite crack. Also, a teleportation exploit using cameras, hackers finding a way to spawn in weapons, armor, and other objects into the game, even NPCs and stuff from other games.
Bethesda just does not have the infrastructure in place that allows them to deal with situations like this efficiently.
These hackers are also running around stealing people's entire inventory. They don't even have to see you to do this, as long as they're within the general radius of the player.
Why are you running?
And because the Pip-Boy is technically an item in your inventory, say goodbye to that too. Luckily, thanks to another glitch, the game checks if you have a Pip-Boy every time you log onto a server, so join a new server and you'll be alright. It takes Bethesda around a week to address this, and when they do fix it, hundreds of people have lost everything. Victims are given two options: roll back their progress to before the muggings, or meet up with someone from Bethesda in a private world who will hand all your stuff back to you. But despite the improvements in the game, problems are surfacing outside of it. As part of the collector's edition, they'd promised a canvas bag, quite clearly labelled here. But on launch day, horror for collectors as they unboxed their editions, and it was nowhere to be found. Instead, a cheap nylon bag in its place. After suggesting a canvas shortage and then denying replacements, they backtrack again and hand out a form for people to fill out a replacement. This goes through very smoothly, with no issues. However, this is not the only underwhelming merchandise. September 2019. It's been around a year since release, and after countless bug fixes, Fallout 76 is in okay shape, and now the game and its mishaps are largely forgotten. But the collector's edition wasn't finished. It would spring up one more time in the media. This time it was the helmets. They were accumulating dangerous levels of mold. If you were the lucky owner of one of the collectible Nuka-Cola versions, turns out the United States Consumer Product Safety Commission considers them a severe health risk for anyone with one in the household. They're recalled and refunded. Bethesda's reputation was already slipping before the events of 76, but Fallout 76 was a major tipping point. Gamers were angry. They were rising up. So angry, these gamers made numerous angry YouTube videos and forum posts, most of which attained a ton of upvotes from other angry gamers. Things were getting serious. Bethesda thought it best not to respond to the horror that was the launch of this game, and return to the shadows, and Todd and the boys lay low, go off the grid. Before launch, you could often find Pete Hines, Vice President of Bethesda Softworks and Head of Marketing and PR on Twitter, answering curious fans' questions about the game. Afterwards, nothing. Complete radio silence. But after a while, the game is improving. The roadmap that initially launched for the game is taking shape, and the expansions are actually decent. They'd even added actual NPCs. Wow. Todd had even apologized.
Fallout 76 had a lot of difficulties at launch, and we got a lot of well-deserved criticism.
To the optimistic, it looked like things at Bethesda had in fact begun to change. Their trail of greed, incompetence, and outright refusal to listen to what their fanbase wanted was just a brief nightmare, a small bump in the road. Finished.
Wrong.
Unfortunately, Todd had other plans. Unfortunately, Todd had other plans. They'd said Fallout 76 would never be paid to win. Microtransactions would be cosmetic only. So when they released repair kits to the Atomic Shop in early 2019, fans are confused. Todd had lied, but he wasn't finished. In 2020, the promised private servers arrive, and they're paywalled behind Fallout 76's new subscription service. Fallout First. Private servers, unlimited storage for scrap, monthly atoms, exclusive cosmetics, and a tent. All for just $13 a month. More expensive than Netflix at the time. Oh god. Fallout 76 is trending on Twitter again. A ton of angry forum posts are cropping up. People are not happy. Also, they forgot to reserve the actual Fallout First domain name, and someone on 4chan managed to get there first. Of course, this service was not without issues. The private servers turned out to use recycled multiplayer worlds that had evidence of recent activity from other players, such as dead enemies, looted areas, and so on. The Infinite Stash was gobbling up people's scrap, which they could no longer find. Yeah, once again, things were not smooth. It's now 2020, and up at corporate movement. See, back in 2007, a private equity firm called Providence had bought around 300 million ZeniMax shares, and then some more in 2010. They're presumed to hold around 30 to 40% of the stock. What followed was a shopping spree. ZeniMax uses this money to buy Tango Gameworks, id, and Arcane, and rumour is, by 2016, their little investment has paid off quite nicely, and Providence is looking to lock in some profits and sell. However, at this point, ZeniMax are only valued at $2.5 billion. That was embarrassing. We can do better, boys. And so, a plan is hatched. Instead of sticking to huge, intermittent, high-quality releases every few years, let's consider the quarterly cash flows. How about a few mobile games, price tags on mods, egregiously priced cosmetics, and then the masterpiece that was Fallout 76.
Oh my god.
There. Now, on paper, the company looks great. Just forget about everything else. And the plan works perfectly. Microsoft's Phil Spencer marches straight into their office, And on September 21st, 2020, they announced the acquisition of ZeniMax Media for $7.5 billion. And on the 9th of March 2021, the deal goes through. Xbox now has 23 game studios, and the prime cut of the meat, Todd Howard and the boys. Morrowind was a generational leap, effectively laying the foundation for the modern open-world game and setting the blueprint for all following Bethesda titles. Todd was the visionary behind it, but with little competition, a horrific engine, and a complete dismissal of fan feedback. Innovation turned to safe, stagnant, and outdated and repetitive releases. And by 2021, it was clear. The Bethesda we once knew was no longer. It's him. How did he find you? Todd leans in gently, hair combed to perfection, his frosty eyes glistening. A faint aroma of jasmine and manuka honey radiates from him. You stand strong and firm. You've fallen for this before. There's nothing he could say to fall, but then you feel his touch. The hairs on your neck shoot up as he leans in, the manuka now hot in your nostrils. And he whispers in your ear once more.
Painstakingly huge, 4 times the size. You'll need a free hand.
Todd's next game was coming out next year, and you'd just pre-ordered it.
Yep. Every time, suckers. Every time.
It's that time of the year. It's Black Friday again, Scam Friday, where a lot of people get scammed from retailers, whether that's online or in a store. A lot of these so-called deals are not exclusive to this day. They're available throughout the year. Besides, the best deal is the lowest price you can find only when you really need something. If you don't need it, it's not a deal. If there's an item or a product that's for sale, that's not reason to buy it. Even if it's half off, if you don't need it, it's not only overspending, but it's also a waste. I know that a lot of people go out shopping because they see everyone else doing it, or they think that that's the only way they can get their hands on a brand name item at a discount price. What they don't understand is that a brand name item doesn't necessarily mean that it's a better product. Like for clothing, you don't need brand name or anything fashionable or new every season. You just need clean, presentable, reliable, good quality clothing. I can tell when somebody's out there dressed to impress and someone who doesn't care about that. Someone smart that refuses to play, that doesn't follow the trend. It's a smart thing to do. Everybody already has a TV, and nobody needs a TV upgrade, unless your TV falls from the second-story building. But even if that happened, it's not gonna happen on Black Friday. Also, nobody needs a new phone. Everybody already has a phone, but they come out with a newer model every year that looks exactly the same as the old one. And they're not cheap. These new phones can cost up to $1,000. And if they come out with a new one every year, if you upgrade every year, in 5 years, that's $5,000. Not counting the $60 per month your carrier charges you. Now we're looking at $8,000 in 5 years in your phone. That's too much. That is a total waste. And every year they come out with a new phone with a slight upgrade. If you compare the phones side by side, they look exactly the same. If you turn them on, they look the same. If you take a picture, it looks the same. Side by side, you can't tell the difference, but it's always the toughest phone they ever made or the strongest phone they ever made. Same thing with the glass. It's the strongest glass they ever put on a phone. This thing is unbreakable, but they still sell you a case for that phone and a glass protector, and on top of that, an extended warranty. Well, if it's unbreakable, why would you need all that? The extended warranty is another scam. That's where they make the real money. Extended warranties on these products are highly marked up. Easily 50 to 200% markup on extended warranty. They make more money on the extended warranty than on the product itself. They know that not everyone is going to use the extended warranty, and they come with limitations. Not everything's covered. But they don't tell you that up front. They may also have deductibles. And in some cases, you have to pay up front and wait for reimbursement. Besides, if they're selling you a good, reliable product, you shouldn't need an extended warranty. And if somebody is not so lucky and gets a faulty product, the company should take care of their loyal customers. I know that these days everyone's talking about inflation, how everyone's struggling to make it, that food prices had gone up over 20% in the last 2 years, how an electric bill here in California can be over $200, insurance is through the roof. Then how can people afford to go buy unnecessary things? They can't afford it. They put it on credit. After making the last minimum payment, they go and max out their credit cards again. When you're on low resources, debt is poison. It's financial quicksand, but everyone's involved in this inflated consumption. I know that people have this social pressure to go show off in their social circle. They can't get over that. Deep down, they know they're getting scammed. They know it's stuff they don't need that they're acquiring, but what they're really acquiring is debt. They go on debt accumulation mode this time of the year. And once somebody is buried in debt, it's really hard to get out because all the payments go to the interest, not the principal. And no matter how much people make, they always find a new way to go broke. They could be making $200,000 a year, but they still broke. They still live paycheck to paycheck. And they got themselves into that situation by financing consumption. This irresponsible spending behavior has been normalized by marketers and social media. People are so empty that without purchasing entertainment, they'll have to face themselves, and that's expensive therapy. People are just wired for social comparison. They have these small social groups where everyone has a status, and retailers and marketers, they know that, and they exploit it. That's why I think that this lifetime inflation is just a trap, and people are just chasing a feeling that fades immediately, but the cost is always there. The wise person understands this and refuses to play. Smart people will keep their lifestyle stable and just let their income grow into savings. Smart people know that happiness from accumulation is temporary, but the freedom from saving is permanent. They know that they're not depriving themselves by living on less. They're investing for the future. I know we come a long way in recent years, and in my videos I've shown a lot of dead malls. That's still happening, but there are still malls out there that get some traffic. Unfortunately, some people are still falling for the scam. I see people with full carts of merchandise thinking they're getting a good deal when they're just overspending and accumulating debt. The limited time opportunity always works on people. Half off, 70% off, the fake smile when you walk into a store. They're actually getting paid to smile at people. People checking out with a shopping cart full of merchandise, but they're still gonna ask them, do you find what you were looking for? They get paid to do that. But in reality, they just want you out of the store. They have a line. And people are very impatient when they're in line, or they see you paying with your credit card, but they're still gonna ask you if you want to open a credit card, because their banker friends want a piece of the pie. What they really want is to put people in more debt. Remember that the best deal is the lowest price you can find only when you really need something. If you don't need it, you're overspending and it's a waste. Like always, let me know what you think in the comments. Always check the description for additional information, and I'll see you in the next video.
Squibbler AI writes full-length books in minutes. Just input your book idea and let our AI transform it into a full-length masterpiece in seconds. Crush writer's block.
And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And they worshipped the dragon which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast, who is able to make war with him? This is from chapter 13 of the book of Revelation, talking about the prophecy of the Antichrist. A few verses later, it goes on to say, Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666, or 666. Even if you've never read the Bible, you no doubt are aware of this number. You've seen it in a movie, graffitied under a bridge, or a very questionable tattoo on a very questionable person. And you probably have somewhat a grasp on what it means. A lot of people think it's the mark of the devil, which isn't too far off, but this number of the beast actually represents the Antichrist, the figure destined to deceive the world, rule with terrifying power, and wage war against the people of God before the end of days. A manifestation of evil on earth in the midst of the rapture. These days, we think of the Antichrist as a daunting prophecy. I mean, we've all been warned about its inevitable arrival, either in church, or in movies like The Omen or Rosemary's Baby, or that uncle you only see a couple times a year. But here's the thing. For early Christians, and I mean 1st century AD early, this passage, that number, wasn't just some vague prophecy about a future boogeyman. A lot of these people believed they knew who the Antichrist was, and it wasn't some all-powerful supernatural entity. They believed it to be someone they'd seen statues of, the face on coins they used at the market. That person was Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, the young emperor of the Roman Empire, or as most of you know him as, just Nero. In his short rule of less than 15 years, Nero went from being one of the most beloved rulers in the empire to one of the most despised and infamous names in history. And not in the way of saying this guy was bad at ruling or politics. He could be compared to King Joffrey from Game of Thrones, a juvenile, narcissistic tyrant with a penchant for sadism. Except in the end, Nero made King Joffrey look like a decent guy, to the point that a lot of people, his own Roman citizens, thought he wasn't just an evil man, but literally the Antichrist. A man thought to be so evil that even after he died, others rose in his place, claiming to be Nero come back to life prepared to seek vengeance. So, let's talk about it. What did he do that was so wicked that many people at the time considered him to be the devil's Historians believe Revelation to be a historic text. In other words, the events of it, or the prophecies, have already come to pass, and a lot of their evidence for that is Nero's ties to the Antichrist. And all that and more is what we're going to talk about today. I will briefly mention again the Brainwash collection is available now for a limited time. Head to the link in the description at wendigoon.shop, and thank you all for the support. It really does mean a lot. With that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and get into it, but as always, thank you for watching. So, who exactly was Nero? Well, as one of Rome's most important historians, Suetonius, once said, quote, Nero degenerated from the good qualities of his ancestors. He yet reproduced the vices of each of them, as if transmitted to him by natural inheritance. In other words, this historian believed that Nero took the bad and left behind the good of what came before him. It raises a question of nature versus nurture, and Nero's nature was certainly of interest. As the fifth and final emperor of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, that meant he was a relative of Julius Caesar. The Julio-Claudian family line is known for establishing the foundations of the Roman Empire and expanding its territory, as well as creating significant political, cultural, and social changes that have pretty tangible and lasting effects even in today's society. Nero's father, Gnaeus, was the son of Antonia Maior, who herself was the daughter of Octavia and Mark Antony, Octavia being the sister of Emperor Augustus, which despite having a child with Octavia, Mark Antony is most famous for marrying Cleopatra. Gnaeus would die before his son Nero's 4th birthday, and it wasn't that much of a loss. As Suetonius writes, Nero's father was, quote, a man hateful in every walk of life. And some of those walks included killing citizens for refusing to drink as much as him, killing a little boy by purposefully running over him, and gouging out a knight's eyes for being too outspoken. Which, to be clear, not like a medieval knight. Those would come sometime later. These were known as equites, which is like a horseback soldier in armor, which I guess is kind of a knight anyway. Nero's mother wasn't much better either. Her name was Agrippina the Younger. She was the great-granddaughter of Augustus, and while she wasn't as overtly violent as Nero's father, she was one of the most ambitious and ruthless women in Roman history. The apple wouldn't fall far from either metaphorical tree. Agrippina was basically the one who put Nero on the throne. In 49 AD, she married Emperor Claudius, her own uncle, and forced Claudius to adopt Nero when he was 12 years old, but this was a move by Agrippina to secure power for herself. Since, that made her the niece, and now wife, and now mother, of the emperor's adopted son. Anyway, when he adopted Nero, Claudius already had a biological son, Britannicus, and a biological daughter, Claudia Octavia, from a previous marriage. Now, of course, as most emperors at the time would do, he had several other children by other women, but Britannicus was next in line to become Caesar. Or at least he was until the year 53 AD. It was then that Agrippina, again Nero's mother, arranged for Nero to marry Claudia Octavia, Claudius's daughter. So she marries her own uncle, who is the Caesar, and then has that uncle adopt her kid, and then arranges for her kid to marry her husband's kid, which again is her biological uncle. Aside from this being pseudo-incestuous, or just regular incestuous, which was not really that taboo at the time, this was another big power move, as it leapfrogged Nero ahead of Britannicus in the line of succession. If it seems that Agrippina really had a hold on Claudius, then you're right. I mean, she probably could have convinced him to jump off a bridge if she really wanted to. But she didn't need to do that, as she just poisoned him instead. Okay, well, I should clarify, we don't know that she poisoned him. Claudius died in the year 54 AD under, quote, mysterious circumstances. And according to ancient sources, however reliable those are, he was poisoned with mushrooms, his favorite food. So when the Caesar was discreetly poisoned by his favorite food, I don't think it's too far to say the person who had explicitly positioned a bunch of people around him to make sure she stayed in power might have been at fault. That, or he had access to the Epstein list. So, Agrippina managed to marry the most powerful man in the world. He dies for some reason, and then she promotes her son, a non-blood relative, to the throne, all within the span of 5 years. Nero assumed the title of Caesar, the most powerful man in the world, at the age of 16. At 16, most of us were getting our driver's license, skipping class, or trying to steal Spark Notes so we didn't actually have to read the book we were assigned. Meanwhile, this kid was ruling the mightiest empire in all of civilization at the time. Which, to be fair, a lot of people died between the ages of 30 to 40 back then, so it's a modern equivalent of like a 40-year-old, so that sounds better, right? But regardless of the era you were born in, 16 is the age where you're too young to know any better, but old enough to do some real damage. Especially when you know, have absolute power, unlimited resources, and a God complex. In 2 Thessalonians, while the Apostle Paul is writing to the church at Thessalonica, he refers to a figure that many believe to be the Antichrist. He says, quote, "Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed."
This video is full of inaccuracies. I love Wendigoon and have been for a fan of his for years. This video is full of inaccuracies. First off, people did not live to the age of 30 or 40. People lived a lot longer than that in Roman times. I think we're going to skip this one, lads.
Love slots? The DraftKings Casino app.
In Logan County, West Virginia, the largest labor uprising in American history would take place. 10,000 coal miners would go to war against the local sheriff's department, coal companies, and eventually the United States military, complete with spies, assassinations, and even aerial bombings. The Battle of Blair Mountain is the largest armed rebellion in the nation's history, besides the Civil War. And I guess also the War for Independence, but it's the largest that doesn't have war in the title. But the Battle of Blair Mountain wasn't just about the battle. It was about years of poor working conditions and abuses brought on by coal companies. So today, I want to talk about how something that began as a union protest resulted in open gunfights, and talk a lot about some of the weird local politics and history that allowed this to happen in the first place. Before we begin, I want to say the Brainwashed collection is only available for like another week, and then it's gone forever. So if you want to get in on some of this merch, like the Panopticon shirt and shorts and the Keep Watching fanny pack, then head to the link in the description at wendigoon.shop, and if you decide to support in that way, it means the world, and thank you. And remember, only like a week left, so get it while you can. And if today's topic sounds interesting to you, then stick around after the ad as we talk about a moment in American history that's hard to even imagine. I mean, I guess there's a lot of like fictional stuff about revolutions and uprisings and things like that, but hard to imagine in real life, even though I guess fictional stories are just imagining real life. You get what I'm saying. As someone who's chronically online, I know that eating healthy isn't always easy, or fun. Between traveling, family, and work, it can be tempting to take the option that's cheap and quick. Thankfully, today's sponsor, Factor, has you covered. Factor gives you the flexibility to stay first place. We need to talk about some of the working conditions that had people so upset in the first place. I should also mention here that if you're interested in this story, my primary source is The Battle of Blair Mountain by Robert Shogan. The book goes into great detail about a lot of the political events of the time and legislation that led to these conditions in the first place. So if the story sounds interesting to you, I highly encourage you to check the book out. I'll have it linked in the description. For most of civilization's history, coal has been a necessity, and as societies became more industrial, coal grew in demand. That's because coal is used in everything from generating electricity to creating steel, things that are pretty important in a developing nation. Pulling coal out of the ground tends to be the first step in a near infinite chain of energy and commodities. However, it's that pulling coal out of the ground that has historically been not so easy. While modern technology and methods makes it a far safer option compared to what it was, for hundreds of years, coal mining was an incredibly dangerous and laborious process, most of the time consisting on pulling the ore from the earth by hand, working in cramped, musty, pitch-black conditions for hours on end. Mining accidents were incredibly common. Everything from falling in the dark cave to being injured in an explosion, which, injuries and explosions can mean the explosion hit you, the debris hit you, or sometimes the whole mountain fell on top of you. Heck, my great-grandfather was killed in a coal mine when he got crushed to death. While he was working his way through a crack in the earth that he had to crawl on his hands and knees in, he didn't know that there was something above him called a kettle bottom. Kettle bottoms are fossilized pieces of tree within coal mines, most often tree stumps, and they're dangerous because while they look like part of the cave, they're actually not connected to the other rocks around them and are instead just sitting there, while still weighing several hundred pounds. So while working on a coal seam above him, he accidentally freed a kettle bottom and it killed him in an instant. And if you were fortunate enough to not die inside of the mine would probably kill you after you left.
Yep.
Because, spending years underground in minimal ventilation with all kind of particulates floating around in the air isn't good for you. Lung issues like COPD, lung cancer, or black lung were very common. Which, by the way, black lung, also known as coal workers' pneumoconiosis, or CWP, is a disease caused by inhaling coal dust over long periods of time. Black lung leads to inflammation and scarring of the lungs. Despite there being signs of it all the way back in 1830, it was not formally recognized by the government until 1969. And it was black lung brought about from working in the coal mine that killed my grandfather, the son of my great-grandfather that was killed in a mine by a kettle bottom. Suffice to say, coal mining was a dangerous job, but one that needed to be done.
Yep.
So you may hear all of that and think, oh, well, at least they were probably paid fairly and treated well, right? Which, that'd be nice.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
For a period of time around the mid to late 1800s, most coal miners in Appalachia, where coal was most abundant, lived in things called company towns. A company town is a town ran by a company. Hard to believe, I know. Yeah. Company towns were structured in such a way that every aspect of a coal worker's life would be through the company. They would come to work at the mine and receive housing in a town located just outside the mine. They would do their shopping at stores provided by the mine. Their kids would go to school at schools funded by the mine. Their entertainment would be whatever the mining company put on, and even the church they went to was whatever the company set up. It was so bad that in most cases, the company wouldn't even pay the workers with money. It would instead pay them with scrip, a currency that could only be used within the company itself. So the company would have workers gather coal that they would then sell and make a profit on, and to the workers, they would just print monopoly money and hand it out as their wages. Then not only does leaving the coal mine, meaning you're leaving your place of work, your place of residence, the place your kids go to school, and the church you go to, but now you don't even have any money to leave with, because all the money you've made is useless outside of the company walls.
Oh my God, shut up, Discord people. I don't give a fuck about your stupid-ass conversation.
Groups of people decided to do something about it, and one of those groups was the United Mine Workers of America. The United Mine Workers, or the UMW, was the first big successful coal union within the United States. Unions began to gain prevalence in the United States around the mid-1800s, and while the first coal miner unions began around 1861, they were fragmented and didn't have a lot of power on their own. So in 1890, the major unions combined into the UMW. UMW's goal was simple: to get better working conditions and wages for mine workers. One of the major tenets that UMW continued to push was that workers should be paid with American dollars instead of the aforementioned scrip or monopoly money. The main way UMW would do this was by staging strikes. The UMW was a large organization with a lot of funds, so they would petition for coal miners to join the union, and once enough of them had joined, they would stage strikes at specific mines, forbidding their union members from working. This created a condition where the mine owners now have to negotiate or risk losing business. This was particularly effective in the late 18 and early 1900s when the United States was going through a huge industrial boom, and if any coal company got too far behind on production, they were left in the dust. So around the country, the UMW began to see better wages and better conditions for workers. Or at least, they did in most of the country. Pretty much everywhere except West Virginia. See, West Virginia, specifically the southwestern portion of West Virginia, as well as the bordering portion of eastern Kentucky, was home to the most abundant coal crops in the country. Because of that, coal mines were everywhere, as were coal companies and, crucially, coal miners. See, in that part of the country, coal mining was generational. It's what you did, it's what your dad did, and it's what his dad did. Because of that, tragically, poor conditions were just considered a part of life. And because for decades it was the only industry in the region, workers didn't have the option to go elsewhere. So this made union efforts around the region ineffective. Because it didn't matter how many people the union got on board, the company would just turn around and hire non-union members. As a matter of fact, several coal companies were so confident that the union would have no effect that they began to institute something known as a yellow dog clause into workers' contracts. This was a clause that forbid workers from joining the union. Or in other words, when you signed up to work, you wrote on paper that you would never join a union. So for a lot of workers, because remember, the company town thing is still in effect at a lot of these coal mines, not only did losing your job mean you were also losing your housing and community, but if you even join a union to try to get better conditions, you lose all of those things too. Not only did these strategies make it near impossible for the union to get anything done in the region, but the efforts of the coal companies also hurt the union elsewhere in the country. Because now, anytime they try to stage a strike in another state, the manufacturers can just always buy coal from the non-union mines in West Virginia, making strikes across the country all the less effective. And anytime the union could get enough miners together in West Virginia to stage a protest, it was met with extreme
evil.
The reason
behavior.
for this was the private security system that coal companies would employ called mine guards.
But you don't
Mine
work.
guards
I
were,
say this
on paper,
I don't
a
work.
security company hired by coal companies to protect their interests. What it most often became was a private police force, doing things like evicting people from their homes or destroying union vehicles or equipment. This was legal because it was under the guise of protecting the company. Just, sometimes protecting the company meant beating up people who might join the union. One of the main groups that contributed to the Mine Guard operation, at least in West Virginia, was the Baldwin Felts Detective Agency. Baldwin Felts began as a detective agency. They were often hired by railroad companies to investigate train robberies. But as train robberies became less popular and workers' strikes became more popular, they switched to stopping those. Baldwin Felts would do everything from standing guard at coal mines with guns to participating in strike breaking, the act of breaking up a workers' strike, and they would most often do this with guns and explosives. It was this combination of factors that would lead to the first big event that would eventually lead to the Battle of Blair Mountain, and that was the Paint Creek Cabin Creek strike.
Deserve to have livable wages. That's what he said, and I quote. That's what my boss told me. He literally said, I don't think you deserve to have livable wages.
Cabin Creek strike. In 1912, in Kanawha County, West Virginia, a miner strike began. This was one of the UMW's first big pushes in West Virginia. They had managed to get enough supporters and enough local leaders to hold a real strike. One of these local leaders was a woman known as Mother Jones. Mother Jones herself is an incredibly influential person in the history of working conditions and unions in the United States. Born in Ireland, at a young age her family immigrated to the United States. However, tragically, her husband and 4 children all died of yellow fever in 1867, and then 4 years later, her business was destroyed in the Great Chicago Fire. From there, she dedicated the rest of her life to helping workers' conditions. This entailed everything from her leading rallies and marches and speeches, to approaching armed guards in the midst of a protest and demanding to be let through. She was instrumental in some of the first child labor laws and was a co-founder of the Industrial Workers of the World, a massive trade union. So during the Paint Creek Cabin Creek strike, she was on the ground leading a lot of these rallies and protests. Eventually, the union was able to get a lot of local mine workers to congregate at a piece of land between Paint Creek and Cabin Creek, West Virginia. So, in response, the local coal companies began to hire the Baldwin Felts Detective Agency to do whatever it takes to break the strike. This began with sabotaging people's vehicles, burning a few homes. Then it escalated to placing snipers around the strike, shooting at people along the fringe of the group. And when the mine workers began to take up their own guns and threaten to fight back, the strike resulted in gunfights. Keep in mind, these mine workers weren't asking for anything egregious. Among their demands included stop blacklisting discharged workers who worked for the union, that the mine operators accept and recognize the union, that they be paid with actual money instead of company scrip, and a check weighman system. At the time, coal miners were paid based on how much coal they produced, so at the end of the shift, whatever coal they had amassed in a cart would be weighed and they would be paid accordingly. However, it was often just one person who worked for the company that determined how much coal you brought in. So if you brought in 2,000 pounds of coal in a day, but the company doesn't want to pay that much, well then maybe this guy says you just brought in 1,500, 1,600 pounds. So this demand to have a 2-person weighman system is to say a check and balance to make sure the miners are actually paid for how much coal they produced. This was enough for the coal companies to decide to kill them over it. Because after the coal companies managed to lobby with the West Virginian government to declare martial law, the Baldwin Felts Detective Agency mounted up a train that the miners referred to as the Bull Moose Special and drove the train along the outskirts of the strike, firing machine guns into the strikers' camp. In addition to this, since the region was under martial law, several of the mine workers that had taken weapons to defend themselves were taken up into military courts and thrown in prison. One of these was Mother Jones, who was sentenced to 20 years in prison. However, after passions cooled and a middle ground was reached between the union and the local coal companies, she would end up only being in prison for 85 days, although during that time she got pneumonia and nearly died. The strike itself began in April of 1912 and ended in July. It's hard to tell between all the violence and malnutrition how many people died in those 3 months, since a lot of people at the time just weren't documented and several families would just bury their own. But most estimates guess it from as low as 12 to well over 50. And while some of those were Baldwin Felts agents who were shot by the strikers, most of that was miners and their families. This quickly established that any improvement in West Virginia coal mine working conditions was going to come at a heavy cost. Over the next decade, small instances of things like this were not uncommon. Several mines would still employ Baldwin Felts as a private security. As mentioned, if you lost your job at the company town, that also meant you lost your housing. And even if around this time several company towns began to pay people with real United States money, everything about being kicked out still applied. So Baldwin Felts was often hired to perform these evictions. As you can imagine, this led to a lot of skirmishes throughout Appalachia. However, after the Paint Creek Cabin Creek strike, a lot of this was more subdued in the public consciousness. It would be a one-off story of an event that happened at one mine and wasn't connected to the whole. And problems people had with the mine were certainly put on the back burner during World War I. See, during World War I, the American industry converted over to the war machine. And coal was considered such a needed commodity that coal miners were exempt from the draft. Despite this, over 50,000 miners joined up to fight, and about 3,000 of them were killed. During the war, there seemed to be this sort of unity. Even if working conditions were bad, everyone felt like they were working for the commonality of their country. Even union organizers stepped back to a degree. being more hesitant to start a strike in such a crucial corner of industry while the country was at war. However, when World War I ended in 1918, things got a lot worse. Because during the war, a lot of new mines had opened up to keep up with the rise in demand. And once the war ended, all of those miners who had joined to fight were now back in the United States looking for their old job. So that meant there was a plethora of workers and a plethora of mines. So the union had even less pull in an area they already didn't have pull. You could strike at any mine you wanted to, and it didn't matter because that company probably owns another dozen mines around the state, and the buyers could always pick the mines with the cheapest coal, which normally meant the worst working conditions. So in 1920, the president of the United Mine Workers of America, John L. Lewis, decided that enough was enough and they were going to do something about the coal mines in West Virginia. Now, to mitigate the risk of me coming across as so black and white of several of the individuals involved, the coal companies had done a great job at demonizing the union. Anytime the union would hold a strike, it would be framed by the coal company as a group trying to take away from American industry and American prosperity. And any union complaint that was brought about during wartime had the union framed as an enemy to the country. Not only that, but several union leaders were framed as crooks, trying to secure backdoor deals for their strikes, which are actually pocketed funds. Now, I'm also not saying that the union was perfect. I'm sure there might have been some malfeasance going on. I mean, look at more recent union leaders like Jimmy Hoffa of the Teamsters, who we know was in league with the mafia. There certainly might have been some bad actors, but by and large, the goal of the unions was to make coal workers not die as much, and also make money that is real money. One side believing unions to be standing for human rights and fighting for the little guy, and the other believing them to be crooks at odds with the nation's progress. Because of this and how relevant it was to the region, several counties in southern West Virginia began to draw battle lines, with some counties' leadership falling in favor of the union and others being staunchly anti-union. A domino effect would begin that would lead to the largest gunfight in non-war American history when John Lewis and the UMW decided to focus their efforts on Mingo County, West Virginia. In early 1920, the UMW began to rally support around Mingo County. Mingo County, just over the Tug River on the Kentucky border, was home to multiple mines, several of which hired union and non-union members. Since there was already a foothold, the union decided to grow their movement there. For one, the union's district in Mingo, District 17, was headed by President Frank Keeney and Treasurer Fred Mooney. Frank was known for delivering fiery speeches, and both him and Fred were well liked in the community. On top of that,
play the fucking ad. Play the fucking ad.
Known for delivering fiery speeches, and both him and Fred were well liked in the community. On top of that, local officials in Mingo were supportive of the union. The mayor, Cable Testerman, was a proponent of the union, as was the sheriff, Sid Hatfield. So the union enlisted the help of Mother Jones, a woman who had become much more famous following her imprisonment at the previous strike in 1912. So when Mother Jones, a woman who had the nickname of the most dangerous woman in America, began to show up in Mingo County and give speeches, union and non-union workers alike came out to listen. These efforts proved a success, and in the beginning of 1920, over 3,000 non-union workers joined the union. Now, it's important to mention that while there were instances of open hostility, as in people shooting at each other, at this moment, union and non-union members were not in open conflict. Meaning, even though the mayor and union, they did not try to stop non-union mines from firing union members or hiring Baldwin Felts. But needless to say, as you can imagine, tensions were high, and it was those tense conditions that led to what would occur on May the 19th, 1920, in Mingo County, West Virginia, in the small town of Maitland. See, one of the coal companies was about to perform a series of evictions on employees they had recently fired. Given that tensions in the region were so high, Baldwin Felts sent 12 of their best men. two of which were brothers of Thomas Phelps, one of the Baldwin Phelps founders. One of these brothers, Albert Phelps, led the dozen agents in Maywood. Things got off on a bad foot immediately. The first thing Albert Phelps does is approach Mayor Testerman and ask if Baldwin Phelps can put machine guns on the roofs of the town, saying it would be useful to the agency if things go south. So this is a guy working as a strikebreaker who is asking a union-sympathetic mayor if they can militarize the town. Mayor Testerman says no, and Albert replies by trying to bribe him. With that, Phelps lets it be and goes about his day. That night, the dozen agents began their evictions at the nearby company town. As you could imagine, evictions were a bit of a soft spot. Sure, if your place of work is providing you housing and you lose your job, it makes sense they would want you to leave. But everyone had a problem with agents showing up and acting as bullies, just throwing people's belongings into the street. And while sure, the agents were acting on behalf of the coal company, it was morally dubious to do it with such force. So while the agents are clearing out houses that night, the police chief, Sid Hatfield, decides to do something about it. Sid Hatfield had a reputation of being a bit of a troublemaker. Before he was made police chief, it wasn't uncommon for him to get into fights and wind up on the other side of the law. Because of this, Hatfield himself was a bit of a local legend. He would cut up and party with the rest of them, but make no mistake, he didn't like bullies. So he shows up where the agents are doing the eviction that night and tells them to stop. Albert Phelps and the other agents say they're here on behalf of the company, and Hatfield needs to get lost. Hatfield, sensing this may turn into a fight, leaves, and instead waits until the next day when the agents are about to leave town. When the 12 agents arrive at the train station after their job is done, Hatfield shows up with several deputized miners. And with this makeshift posse, he walks up to Albert Phelps and says he has a warrant for his arrest, the warrant being for unlawful evictions. Albert laughs and says he has a warrant for Hatfield's arrest. To dispute the matter, Sid Hatfield and Albert Phelps begin to walk towards the mayor's office. Well, not really an office. Testerman owned a jewelry store in town, so they were going to his jewelry store. As they're walking through town, both of their respective groups are following in tow. Mayor Testerman sees the group walking towards his jewelry store and meets them out in the street, standing right in front of a nearby hardware store. Now, the following series of events have been debated and he said, she said it into oblivion. What most reports agree happened is that Testerman walked up to the two men who were at the front of the pack and asked to see Albert's warrant for Sid Hatfield's arrest. Meanwhile, Hatfield slowly slips inside of the hardware store, still a short distance from Albert Phelps and the mayor out front. The mayor, while looking at Albert Phelps' warrant for Sid Hatfield, says that it's a farce. And then we don't know exactly what happened next, but what we do know is that people started shooting each other. Others say as soon as the mayor said it, Phelps shot the mayor. Others say that Hatfield saw Mayor pull the gun and both fired their guns at the same time, one into Phelps, one into the mayor. What is for sure is as soon as someone fired that first shot, everyone else started shooting. That street in Matewan turned into a shooting gallery. Baldwin Phelps agents ducking for cover, deputized miners firing from store windows. When the gun smoke cleared, 10 men lay dead. And among those 7 dead agents was Albert Phelps and the other Phelps brother, Lee Phelps. 6 Baldwin Phelps agents managed to get away, with several of them jumping across the Tug River and swimming to safety in Kentucky. Which I guess I should clarify, it wasn't 12 Baldwin Phelps agents that went. It was technically 13, because it was Albert Phelps and then 12 men. If Southern West Virginia was a powder keg ready to blow, then this was the match. What started as a coal company hiring out a business to carry out evictions had resulted in a shootout that killed 7 people from that company, 2 of which are brothers of one of the founders, 2 deputized miners, and the mayor. This instantly became a political firestorm. The union used this event as fuel for the engine. What better example for how out of control the coal companies are that they hired a gang that shot the mayor. This led to a new wave of resistance all across Mingo County, as several coal miners said, oh, we can just shoot those guys. So in the months that would follow, small skirmishes would happen from time to time between Baldwin Phelps agents that overstepped their ground with Union men. This defeat was also perceived as a sort of embarrassment for Baldwin Phelps, and assumedly, seeing that the emperor has no clothes, a lot of miners continued to sign up with the Union, with a growing spirit of rebellion rising up in the area. Union and Union sympathizers began to stockpile weapons and ammo. Union and Union sympathizers began to stockpile weapons and ammo. Mayor Testerman's jewelry shop was taken over by Sid Hatfield, who converted it into a gun store. While this event seemed to be a win for the Union initially, it also had the effect of making the companies double down. For example, Police Chief Sid Hatfield was immediately put on trial for the murder of Albert Phelps, the trial beginning several months later in January of 1921. But as mentioned earlier, there were so many different accounts of what exactly went down, and Albert Phelps was far from an innocent party, so eventually Sid Hatfield was acquitted. With this acquittal, Hatfield was solidified as a hero in the local community. There was a large celebration, and he was carried through the streets of the town when he was released. The miners' union saw this and decided to capitalize on it, creating a silent film called Smiling Sid in 1921. This silent film simply depicted Sid Hatfield with several of his followers walking through nearby mine camps, which these mine camps were where people went after they were evicted from their homes and their jobs, effectively tent colonies on the outskirts of town. In many cases, if these people were union members, they were bankrolled by the union. Most of these men and their families were destitute and sickly, so showing Sid Hatfield walking through them as a sort of guardian figure was an effective propaganda piece for the Union. The legend around Sid Hatfield only grew from there as well. Either Sid himself or people around Sid said that he was a member of the Hatfield family, like the Hatfields and McCoys. The evidence for this is kind of shaky, and I'm pretty sure it would have required a child being born out of wedlock, so there's no real evidence for it. But at the time, people ate it up. When a new mayor was elected, a new police chief was appointed, so despite losing his title, Sid was then made a constable. And while there isn't explicit evidence of this besides the fact he would be put on trial for it, it's believed that Sid led posses of Union sympathizers in sabotaging anti-Union coal companies. There was a lot of coal mine equipment that was being blown up and burnt down, and a lot of them suspected Sid, as you can imagine. And once again, there's no evidence of it, but I think he probably absolutely did that. However, not every development that came out of this shooting, a shooting that would be known as the Matewan Massacre, not all of them were in the Union's favor. For one, while the Union did everything they could to bolster the public's opinion of Sid Hatfield, coal companies did everything they could to tear it down. Chief among them being his relationship with the mayor's wife. While Mayor Testerman was alive, him and Sid Hatfield were good friends. And while Sid Hatfield was unmarried, he would often go over to the mayor and his wife's home. After the mayor was killed, Sid Hatfield would marry the mayor's now widowed wife 2 weeks after his death. I don't know anything nefarious happened before the mayor's death. And back then maybe that was just a way of her wanting to live with him so she wouldn't be alone and they were friends or whatever. This is also, I believe, how Sid Hatfield came to own Testerman's jewelry store, as it was transferred to the mayor's wife after his death, who is now Hatfield's wife. It doesn't matter if anything shady went on between the two of them while the mayor was still alive or not, because it was enough for the coal companies to work with. Rumors began to sprout up that perhaps what happened in the gunfight is Sid Hatfield shot the mayor so that he could have his wife. Several of these rumors even made themselves known during Hatfield's trial. Although, as his defense attorney pointed out, that would be absurd for him to want the mayor dead, so he stages a series of events where 13 Baldwin Felts agents show up to perform evictions, and then he gets a warrant for their arrest as some super impractical mechanism to kill the guy whose wife he wants to sleep with. But nevertheless, rumors are sticky, and those that disliked Hatfield had all the more reason to do so. Furthermore, this highlighted some of the tactics that the coal companies were employing. Namely, a man named Charlie Lively, who turned out to be a spy for Baldwin Felts. Charlie Lively lived in Matewan and had a restaurant right across the street from Testerman's jewelry store. It turns out he had been an informant for Baldwin Felts for over a year, outwardly professing to be pro-union so that he could get in conversations with people like Testerman and Hatfield, and then reporting back to the coal companies and Baldwin Felts who to look out for. This meant that even among pro-union members, you had to question who you trusted, which every element of all of that creates a lot of paranoia. This was in a county that, as mentioned, had both union sympathizers and company sympathizers. Well, after Hatfield was acquitted, the coal companies decided to double down. About 80% of the local non-union mines began incorporating yellow dog contracts, which, as mentioned, barred people who are getting a job from ever joining the union. And several mines that would previously hire non-union or union members began to fire union mine workers and incorporate yellow dog contracts. So on either side of the aisle, everyone is getting much more entrenched. People are even more steadfast in their resolve, and now they're holding rifles. Stories of small skirmishes or Baldwin Felt's abuses or just company overreach made their way through the mountains. And in response, a sort of Cold War began. Now, the first layer of this was destroying assets of the coal companies, as well as destroying parts of the mines itself, like blowing up coal tipples or burning down office buildings. The second order of effect was harassing scab workers. Scabs, or people who worked despite the ongoing strike, were at first encouraged to quit working for the company and then harassed. And if that didn't work, threats were made to keep them from helping the company. It got to the point where the local coal companies were trying to outsource workers. And as workers arrived at the train station in town, union members would be there to greet them and kindly ask them to leave, even offering to buy their ticket home. As a matter of fact, the union was bankrolling these tickets, and in the first 6 months of this strike and protest that resulted after Hatfield's acquittal, would-be strikebreakers would have to try to sneak to work at the coal company. So union members and strikers would set up lines around the coal mines themselves, preventing would-be strikebreakers from making their way into the mines. And yes, this entire situation was exactly bizarre to outsiders as it probably is to you now. However, the man the organization sent, Jonathan Spivak, was there to offer legal advice or negotiation assistance, and that is not the stage the people of West Virginia were at. In a letter back to the president of the ACLU, Jonathan said, quote, "The ACLU seemed under the impression that there is some semblance of legal procedure here. There is not. You can't hold a meeting here, get pinched, and then fight it out in the courts. If you try to hold a meeting in the southern counties, you'll never live to see the courts. This state is a powder keg, ready to blow up any minute." This state is a powder keg, ready to blow up any minute. While Hatfield was accountable, the sheriff of Mingo County, Sheriff Blankenship, seemed to be a full union supporter and turned a blind eye to some of the union things that were a bit more violent and perhaps not exactly legal. As far as the greater governments around the county level, no one really knew what to do. It wasn't unheard of for coal companies to call on the federal government to help when a strike had gone too far. Or at least, the coal company says it's gone too far. And National Guard or state police forces had been called in before. But now it was a bit harder to do that. Like, sure, the day of the Matewan Massacre, there was a big shootout, but that was over as quickly as it started. Everything that's happened since then has been guerrilla tactics. They're sneaking in at night and blowing up company property, not exactly something to call the military over. Also, at the time, the West Virginia government had no real way of handling it. The state police force had only been created in 1919, a couple of years prior, when Governor Cornwall assembled the group in response to another strike that had occurred. But regardless of the force you have, you can't exactly arrest someone who's as gone as quickly as the deed is done. But regardless, the Union was losing favor with the government in and outside of West Virginia. See, while initially they were sympathetic to the workers' plight and working conditions for coal miners, now there were stories of agencies being shot at and people being threatened if they went to work. When the coal mines would lay off workers for joining the union, these union members began to burn down and blow up the company towns. While their patience with the union isn't entirely gone, as far as the government's concerned, there's a lot of property damage and not a lot of coal being made. Because of this, the West Virginia government began to push back on the more violent strikers. If the state police believed they took gunfire from somewhere, or said they believed they took gunfire from somewhere, they would step in and arrest all of the men within a given community. Most often, these communities were the aforementioned tent colonies. Add to this, reports of Baldwin Felt mine guards at nearby coal companies abusing workers or kicking workers out were still common. And given that the police were arresting people within the essentially homeless camps of the mine camps, the Union sympathizers began to realize the police were not there to help them. If they wanted something done, they were going to have to do it themselves. This led to something in May of 1921 known as the Three-Day War. All up and down the Tug River Valley, strikers began to raid local coal mines. Most of this involved them encircling coal mines throughout the region, and after getting into a gunfight with the local mine guards, entering the companies and destroying a bunch of equipment. For 3 days along a 10-mile battlefront, Union miners fought against the state police and strikebreakers. This was the first time, at least in Matewan, that day-to-day life came to a halt. I mean, even during the Matewan massacre, like, sure, it was a big shootout for like 5 minutes, but then afterwards things went to normal. People went to the store, kids went to school. Not during the 3 days battle. School shut down, store shut down. The only person that was really walking the street was Sid Hatfield. He, heavily armed along with a group of men, would patrol the town waiting for any attack. During one of these patrols, Hatfield came across the superintendent of the Stone Mountain Coal Company. The superintendent was overseeing an unloading at the train station, and Hatfield told him to stop or else he'd be attacked by snipers. So yeah, again, just keep perspective of this whole thing. The constable of the town is approaching superintendent of a huge coal company saying he has snipers positioned all around, or if not his, he just knows there are snipers all around that will shoot this guy if he keeps trying to operate the company. During the course of the argument, Hatfield struck the superintendent in some way. Superintendent says he was hit with a rifle, while Hatfield said he, quote, just slapped him. Through the midst of all of this, even before the 3-day battle, Frank Keeney and Fred Mooney were doing everything they could to negotiate with the coal companies. But according to them, despite all the violence that was happening, it was getting harder and harder to find a truce. Because the higher emotions got, the less the coal companies wanted to concede any ground. Keep in mind, Keeney and Mooney are the head of the local union. All the strikers are listening to them, and all they want at the negotiation table is things like an 8-hour workday, being paid real money, not dying as much. And all of these are completely unacceptable to the coal companies. However, in the midst of the 3-day war, a more moderate truce for the moment is determined. Martial law will be implemented by the state of West Virginia, and both sides will cool the open conflict. So the police and strikebreakers will quit going in for arrest, looking for trouble, and the union members and strikers will quit, blowing stuff up and shooting people for now. Everyone agrees to this, and almost immediately, the martial law just falls into the coal company's favor again. Like, for example, they instituted a weapons policy that only those with permits, something that not a ton of people had, permits for guns would be allowed to carry them. This meant that there were routine checks on weapons that strikers and union members were carrying, and therefore routine gun confiscations. The police said they would do the same thing to the Baldwin Felts members or any of the strikebreakers, but they simply never checked for permits, meaning they were only disarming one side of the conflict. So the striking coal miners began to set up weapon stockpiles in the woods. Weapons were traded and positioned in ways for the police to not know. And while they quit shooting each other for a little bit and eventually the martial law subsided, in August of that year, things would get worse than they ever had been. And it began on August the 1st with the trial of Sid Hatfield. During an unrelated trial for some charge Sid Hatfield was hit with, because he got charged with stuff a lot. Like hitting the superintendent of the coal company, that landed him another charge. During an unrelated trial, Hatfield finds out that he's wanted in McDowell County for blowing up coal tipple. Now, McDowell is different from Mingo County because in McDowell, they're not pro-union. And Sid Hatfield had made quite the reputation for himself as a pro-union constable who potentially was blowing up coal company assets. So Hatfield and his attorney called the McDowell County Sheriff's Office, and Hatfield says he will turn himself in to stand trial willingly as long as the sheriff can promise him his safety. The sheriff does, and after Hatfield's initial arrest and then being bailed out, his trial begins on August the 1st. That morning, on arriving in McDowell County, Sid Hatfield was met by Charlie Lively. That morning, on arriving in McDowell County, Sid Hatfield was met by Charlie Lively. Charlie Lively being the guy that opened a restaurant next to Hatfield back in Mingo County and turned out to be a spy for the Baldwin Felts Agency. Charlie, who I'm sure Hatfield had no interest in seeing, followed Hatfield around that morning, eventually remarking that he'll see him at the trial. When it came time for the trial, Hatfield made his way to the courthouse along with his friend, Ed Chambers. Ed Chambers was a co-defendant along with Hatfield for blowing up the same tipple. Both of the men were there with their wives, Ed's wife and Hatfield's wife, who is again the widowed wife of Mayor Testerman. As the four of them are making their way up the courthouse stairs, they see standing at the front of the courthouse several Baldwin Felts agents. This on its own isn't entirely unusual. The Baldwin Felts were probably working in the area on the behalf of coal companies, or perhaps they were called to trial as a witness, right? What was odd was that Charlie Lively, the Baldwin Felts spy, and the man who had been following Hatfield around all morning, was standing there with him. And little did Sid Hatfield know that two of those agents were two survivors of the Matewan massacre over a year ago, now standing in front of Sid Hatfield once again. As the four of them made their way up the McDowell County Courthouse staircase, the Baldwin Felts agents pulled their guns and fired. Three agents, two that had survived the Matewan massacre and the spy, Charles Lively, killed Ed Chambers and Sid Hatfield on the courthouse stairs. Charles Lively walking up to Ed Chambers, who was still alive, pushing off his crying wife, shooting him in the back of the head. At the same time, a fourth Baldwin Felts agent turned around and unloaded his pistols into the wall of the courthouse, then placing the empty guns on the body of Chambers and Hatfield to make it look like they shot first. Sid Hatfield's wife, Jessie, now widowed a second time by the Baldwin Felts agency, crying, screaming at the agents who killed her husband, said, "We didn't come here for this." And one of the agents replied, "Well, that's all right. We didn't come down to Matewan on the 19th of May for this either." And the agent's plan for the self-defense play worked. On the same streets that Sid Hatfield had been carried away from his last trial as a hero, him and Ed Chambers were now carried in caskets. The funeral was attended by many Union members and strikers. Sid Hatfield was at once a leader and a visionary, and now he was a martyr. Sam Montgomery, friend of Sid Hatfield's and fellow striker, said the eulogy on the Kentucky side of the Tug River, just across the bridge from Matewan. And to this angry, desperate crowd, Montgomery did not mince his words. Quote, "We have gathered here today to perform the last sad rites for these two boys who fell victims to one of the most contemptible systems that has ever been known to exist in the history of the so-called civilized world. Deliberately shot down, murdered in cold blood while they were entering a place which should have been a temple of justice, and by whom? Men who are working under the direction of and taking their orders from coal operators who live in Cincinnati, Chicago, New York City, and Boston. Sleek, dignified, church-going gentlemen who would rather pay fabulous sums to their hired gunmen to kill and slay men for joining a union than to pay like or lesser amounts to the men who delve into the subterranean depths of the earth and produce their wealth for them. At the same time, these same men prate up their charities, their donations to philanthropic movements, act as vestrymen and pillars of the churches to which they belong. There can be no peace in West Virginia until the enforcement of the laws is removed from the hands of private detective agencies and from those of deputy sheriffs who are paid not by the state but by the great corporations, most of them owned by non-residents who have no interest in West Virginia's tomorrow. Even the heavens weep with the grief-stricken relatives and the bereaved friends, these two boys. If the Matewan Massacre was the match to the powder keg that was West Virginia, this was forgetting about the match and just throwing a stick of dynamite in there for good measure. Montgomery's eulogy rang true in the hearts of several of the strikers who were looking for a fight anyway. Even the heavens weep. There will be no justice in West Virginia. But even without the eulogy, the events speak for themselves. Sid Hatfield was the Union's guy. He was the strikers' guy, fighting for the common man. When the town of Matewan was in the midst of war with the local police, he walked up and down the streets with a rifle, making sure the town was safe. And now he was shot to death in the next county over, and everyone who was responsible walked away. Up until this point, it can be argued that all the miners wanted was for the companies to be better, for them to be treated with respect, with fair wages. And sure, they still wanted those things, but after Hatfield was murdered, they wanted revenge too. And it was apparent to everyone at this point that something was about to happen. They just didn't know what. Remember how I said a few months previously in May there was a martial law put in place? Well, during that time when they were checking strikers for weapon permits and monitoring the town, they began arresting strikers for all kinds of various misgivings. Things like colluding in sabotage or stockpiling weapons. Well, several of these guys had been held for several months at stations in nearby counties, some of which were in Logan County, just north of Mingo. Logan County was anti-union, and the sheriff allowed the union strikers who were arrested to be jailed there. while several of these strikers set about heading over to Logan County and raiding the police stations. They would just bust into the station, disarm the police, and break out their guys. Frank Keeney and Fred Mooney get a little panicked. Remember, they have been the voice of the union and the strikers to the coal companies. They've had a lot of meetings that maybe have given a little ground but no real headway. Well, now people are more concerned about when they get to start shooting than when they get, workers' comp. So Mooney and Keeney plead the union members and the strikers to give, the legal process one last chance. And says what they should do instead of, attacking the police is take their protests directly to the governor's office in Charleston. So Mooney, Keeney, and several hundred miners marched to the capital at Charleston. From there, a series of speeches were heard, impassioned speeches from people like Keeney and Mother Jones. Eventually, the governor relented and had an audience with Keeney and Mooney on August 7th, 1921. In front of the governor, the two men had a broad range of demands. Quoting from Shogun's book here, chiefly for a joint commission of management and labor to adjust wages and mediate disputes, but also for an 8-hour day and the election of check weighmen at the mines. For good measure, the petition also included a statement from the 1920 Republican Party platform pledging, quote, to correct the abuses that have grown up under the so-called private guard or detective system. The last one was a dig because the Republicans controlled the legislature at the time, and that was something they promised to do before they got elected, and oh look, they didn't do that. So stop the mine guard system, have a check system in place for the weighmen, an 8-hour workday, and a system to mediate disputes and pay.
This is still.
Hey, the meeting lasted 30 minutes and Governor Morgan said he would think about it. Walking outside to the demonstrators, Keeney said, we are going to organize Mingo and Logan County or fill the jails so full they won't be able to feed them. Well, 10 days later, the governor responded by rejecting all demands. Not even a single piece of it, not even a petty we'll give you a little bit of a pay raise. He was just like, nope, none of it. The reason the miners are in Charleston in the first place is because Keeney and Mooney said, hey, let's give the whole shooting each other one more shake. And then do that, and it wasn't a shake. What does that lead? They've put a state for a year, sit and just, and the group said, so testers said, all right, going to walk to Meade County and Logan County, and we are going to bust every single striker that has been arrested through this entire thing out of jail. And we are going to bring every bullet and trigger necessary to do it. So their plan is to meet up on the southern border of Kanawha County, send out flyers, rally union miners from every part of southern West Virginia, and march the 50 miles from Kanawha to Mingo. However, there is one hang-up with this. To get from Kanawha to Mingo, you've got to walk through Boone and Logan County. The sheriff of Logan County, Sheriff Chafin, is super staunchly anti-union. He let the strikers be jailed there and all. Not to mention, Don Chafin really hates the strikers for disarming his men. So when Don Chafin hears that there is a group of strikers that are going to march with guns through Logan County, he puts together a team of his own deputies, local state police, as well as anyone who's willing to volunteer and hold a gun. It says that the strikers will never make it past Blair Mountain, a mountain at the north end of Logan County. Upon hearing this, the strikers who are about to begin their march are met with protest from Mother Jones. Mother Jones begs the strikers not to march. She says that it'll be a bloodbath and no good will come of it, but Keeney and Mooney says they're resolved to go. So then, Mother Jones presents a piece of paper that she says is a telegram from the governor. And the telegram says if they don't march, he will meet all of their demands. This is suspicious, because the governor was just talking to Keeney and Mooney and said he wasn't interested. And even if he was interested now, why would he go through Mother Jones to tell them? When they ask to see the telegram, Mother Jones tells them no. Eventually, they get it out of her, and Keeney says that it's a fake. This leads them to think that perhaps Mother Jones is working on behalf of the companies and the governor. And this is a historical note that there's not really any, concise answer on. which I'll be the first to admit I'm not perfect. Shocking, I know. When I do research for these videos, I'm normally learning about all of these characters for the first time. And when I hear about someone like Mother Jones that seems to have been super influential in decades worth of history, it can be hard to know from a single excerpt of her life the whole of her character. While I don't think Mother Jones was a spy the entire time, like Charles Lively or some would allege, I do think it's possible that she was just kind of susceptible. According to Shogun, she had a habit of protesting coal companies very intensely, but then after she talks to the head of the company, she's like, well, maybe that one's actually not so bad after all. So perhaps she had a meeting with Morgan and Morgan won her over, even if he wasn't deserving of such. Either way, Mooney and Keeney and now the rest of the strikers threw off Mother Jones' opinion, and beginning on August 20th, the group began to make their way through Boone County. They picked a rally point at the southern end of Boone County, and over the next several days, 13,000 miners would show up. And again, this isn't just a protest. This is 13,000 people with arms ready to be shot at and shoot back. This level of turnout gets everyone real nervous all at once, because it seems to the governor as well as the federal government, this is now a real problem. I mean, sure, it was always a real problem, but 13,000 people is like a small nation's army. And on the other side of the border in Logan County, Sheriff Chafin doubles down. He had garnered a few private planes as well as requested planes from the U.S. military. On top of that, the new president, William G. Harding, had the Army on standby to send into Logan County if needed. On the flip side, the Union and strikers were building their own army, but in very non-distinct ways. You remember how I said back at the Paint Creek, Cabin Creek strike, the train that was used to shoot at everyone was called the Bull Moose Special, you know, a joke about Teddy Roosevelt? Well, these strikers, while in Boone County, stole a train and called it the Blue Steel Special, and prepared to use it as a mobile firing platform and a troop transport. Well, there was certainly a ton of people already there.
Love slots, the draft...
Certainly a ton of people already there. Several other people were coerced to be there, as if someone was unlucky enough to be driving down the road and come across a group of miners walking to the protest. Protest is a strong word. Guerrilla army, more like. Their car was often procured for them for the sake of the cause, or they were held at gunpoint and made to participate in the strike themselves. Meanwhile, Sheriff Chafin over in Logan County began to station his forces atop Blair Mountain, digging in trench lines and machine gun placements on the ridges. Any advancement directly up the mountain would result in a bloodbath. And Keeney and Mooney, who about a week ago were really hype about marching through Logan County, now have cold feet. Not so much that they had cold feet about the march or breaking people out of jail, more so about the strategy of it. Because the miners are effectively walking into a trap. When they get actual cold feet about doing this at all, is when the president sends a major to have a conversation with the two men, and the major tells them that if this goes bad and a war breaks out in southern West Virginia, they, as the union organizers who put this group together, would be held responsible. So Keeney and Mooney begin to walk around to the strikers and be like, what is a protest? Wouldn't we rather all just go home, be in a mine? Am I right, guys? Remember that? That was fun. And citing concerns for success, managed to quell the spirits a little bit. Obviously people are mad and want to do something, they're just convinced that they should wait. Meanwhile, the union that Mooney and Keeney represents, who are given a similar threat by the federal government, offered to buy train tickets for all of the miners to get out of town, and then they can regroup and talk about it later. So on August the 25th, all of the miners that are camped on the southern border of Boone County begin to make their way to local parks and train stations to start making their way out of town. Well, I have a sneaking feeling, based on what's about to happen, that Sheriff Chafin didn't like that answer. See, Chafin also really wanted to fight. You don't enlist every local police force and multiple airplanes unless you need something to go down. You dug those battle trenches on the top of the mountain. You might as well use them. So when Sheriff Chafin hears that the protesters are starting to disperse, he thinks now would be a perfect time to serve a few warrants. So on August the 25th, he sends a group of his deputies to the nearby town of Sharples, where he has a warrant for some strikers who were apparently a part of the disarming of Logan County officials like a month ago. His deputies go up there to serve warrants, and sure enough, a gunfight happens in which 2 miners are killed and another is shot. So, almost instantly, the 13,000 miners on the southern end of Boone County who were about to go home hear that the sheriff of the next county over that they were about to get into a fight with just killed 2 miners and shot another. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back. There was absolutely no coming back from this. They really wanted to fight, and they were about to do it right now. Keeney and Mooney wisely got out of town, and another union organizer, Bill Blizzard, who wanted to fight as much as all the other miners, stepped in as a figurehead to take charge. At this point, Sheriff Chafin was also getting financial backing from the coal companies that were in Logan County, several of which hiring Baldwin Felts agents to work with the sheriff in defending against the oncoming miners. Exact estimates are not known, as some of the miners still probably left after August the 25th. But roughly 10 to 12,000 miners still pushed into Logan County, where Sheriff Chafin was waiting with 2,000 to 3,000 armed men. What would follow is, once again, the largest armed conflict in the United States aside from the Civil War, or the Revolutionary War, you get it. So the strikers, now being commandeered by Bill Blizzard, are a full-blown irregular army making their way into Logan County. On the way, several of them sang a chant set to the tune of the Battle Hymn of the Republic. I mean, I can't sing, but I guess I have to sing what they were singing, right? Okay. Every little river must go down to the sea. All the slaving miners and our union will be free. Going to march to Blair Mountain, gonna whip the company, and I don't want you to weep after me. You're welcome. With some singing a rendition that ended with, we'll hang Don Chafin to a sour apple tree. Now, the men weren't uniformed, but they had running passphrases and ways of identifying themselves. The way running passwords work is there is a challenge and then a response. So if you're in the battlefield and you see someone and you're not sure if they're on your side or the enemy's, you say a challenge or the start of a phrase, and the other person is supposed to finish it. If they don't finish it, well, then you can start shooting at them. The miners had 2 passwords, and keep in mind, most of them had knowledge of this, as many of the miners were veterans of the First World War. The first challenge was, "Where are you going?" to which the correct response was, "To Mingo." The other challenge was, "How are you coming?" and the response was, "I come creeping." That goes so hard. For uniform, some people had the United Mine Workers insignia, with several of the women, which were mostly wives and daughters of the men who were prepared to fight. Several of the women who were there to act as nurses wore the insignia on their caps. The other identifier that the miners had was a red bandana. Bandanas were commonly used in the mines as sweat rags, or if you tied it around your face, it was the only protection your lungs got. So many of the miners, prepared for battle, tied their red bandanas around their necks. And this is where we get the popularization of the term redneck. Now, I want to be clear, this isn't where the term began, as the term originally came from Scottish rebels in the 17th century who wore red cloth around their neck to protest against English rule. And there's some evidence that the term redneck was used to describe field workers who would get sunburns across the back of their neck. But this was the first time that the term was used to describe working class or lower class people within the southern United States. On the other side, Sheriff Chafin's forces wore uniforms as well. The men dressed themselves in khaki and wore white armbands. They also had running passwords, the passwords being Holden and Amen. Had running passwords, the passwords being Holden and Amen. By August 30th, the miners had arrived around the foothills of Blair Mountain, as well as several small towns around Blair Mountain in northern Logan County. The fight would kick off that morning when Sheriff Chafin's head deputy, John Gore, and a couple of his men were doing their patrols around the base of the mountain. It was then that they ran into a group of miners. The two groups began yelling back and forth, asking who the other was, before the miners asked for the password. Chafin's men replied with Amen, their password, and were promptly shot by the miners. 2 of the deputies were killed instantly, and the third was executed by one of the miners who, before he fired, said, "That's for Sid." With this, the Cold War went hot and the battle raged through the first week of September. Several of the miners engaged in bump-and-run tactics. After one of Chafin's machine gun emplacements was discovered, miners would take pot shots at the position before disappearing into the woods, miners pushing forward until they were met with too heavy of resistance and falling back. Meanwhile, Chafin not only employed the use of machine guns, but snipers. Several waiting on choke points they expected miners to pass through, and then being fired upon before the snipers would relocate. Also, remember those private planes that Chafin had got a hold of? Well, these planes would be flown over regions where miners were expected to be, which, mind you, was mostly countryside as well as houses and communities that were suspected of being sympathetic with the miners. Several of these planes would drop early iterations of tear gas, and others would drop pipe bombs. Now, while it seems like the pipe bombs didn't have a huge effect, one hit someone's house and another landed between two women that were washing clothes by the river. But thankfully, pipe bomb did not go off. The military planes mentioned earlier were used for surveillance of miners' positions, but they never deployed weapons. I've heard people mix the two facts about planes dropping bombs and military planes being used to say that the military bombed American civilians here, which, not directly. The military planes were used against the American civilians as in surveillance, and the planes that dropped bombs were private planes commandeered by the sheriff. But since the sheriff was acting on behalf of the military or in the favor of the military, then you could kind of say that it still counts. The battle lines across the northern border of Logan County were non-stop. Throughout the night, guard patrols would trade shots with muzzle fire across hilltops. The miners would clear out machine gun positions only to be met with another. Every time ground was gained somewhere, it was lost somewhere else. After a couple days, the miners began to destroy bridges or other avenues of transport, attempting to bottleneck any advancement that the sheriff's men could make into their positions. And eventually, the miners tried to take the nearby towns surrounding Blair Mountain, although these were equally defended. One reporter who was there recounts seeing several miners push the sheriff's forces out of a trench, only to fill that trench with their own forces before they get torn apart by an until then hidden machine gun placed perpendicular to the trench. And that leads to one of the big reasons that the Battle of Blair Mountain was as unsuccessful for the miners as it was: a lack of organization. Sure, a lot of these men were willing to fight, and a lot of them had combat experience. But there was no greater directive other than, let's walk that way. Bill Blizzard was leading the charge, sure, but I mean, he was literally saying, yeah guys, let's go that way. There was no tactician, there was no chain of commands, there was no upkeep as to where they should push or where they should dedicate resources. And meanwhile, the defenders in Sheriff Chafin had exactly that. Not to mention the military assets and leaders that were sent in to assist him in the first place. The miners had the gumption and the manpower, but they didn't know what to do with it. Colonel William Eubanks of the National Guard was a huge asset to Chafin. It's not only a lot of the logistics, but the strategy came from him. Ultimately, the Logan County forces were able to keep the miners back for several days. And it was all over by September 4th when the military showed up. See, as soon as the battle kicked off in earnest on August 30th, the military was on their way. They didn't start arriving until September 2nd, and by September 4th, they were all there. The miners never attempted to fire on United States soldiers. Several of them were soldiers themselves. They viewed the coal companies of being at fault, and the local sheriff's departments and police departments as being in cohorts. Several of them saw the arrival of the military as salvation, hoping that the government would bring some sense to this lawless system. But of course, soldiers were just there for the miners. As miners surrendered themselves to the U.S. troops, word got out that they were confiscating weapons. So most of the miners began to hide their weapons in the woods before they stepped in front of the troops. About 1,000 miners formally surrendered to the military, and way more than that just disappeared. I mean, you were never formally there in name anyway. If you can just walk away, that's probably the best option, especially in a time before security cameras. To put it in perspective, only 400 guns were turned in, which goes to show how many were buried in the hills somewhere or went away with the people who brought them. Now, the number of people that were killed in this battle will never be known, mostly because it seems both sides dragged away their dead. Perhaps trying to save them, thinking they were injured, perhaps not wanting the other side to know they were experiencing losses. But on either sides of the conflict, no one really kept count, and it seems that, again, families just buried their own. Because of that, the official kill estimates are laughably low. On the high end, you'll hear like 100 across both sides in a conflict made up of like 15,000 people. And the lowest number I've seen is 13, which, like, I guess 3 of those were the 3 cops killed at the kickoff of this, and you're telling me through a week of constant gunfire, only 10 more people got hit? I mean, there are several journalists who write about seeing bodies on each other, or like the account I mentioned earlier of a whole trench of people getting lit up with a machine gun. I will say that several of the people who fought in the battle said it was really difficult to get a hit because the underbrush was so thick. Like, they would know where people are and they would keep firing, but they weren't able to make contact. The bullets kept getting deflected. But it's gotta be way more than 100. I don't think it would hit like 1,000, but 200 or 300 at least. As soon as the battle was over, this was the worst press the Union had ever received. Because again, it was already kind of a divisive political issue. And now the Union had been given a chance, and their 2 leaders had led 13,000 men to get into a fight with the military. Because of that, the Union plummeted in the years following. Over the next few years, the UMW's membership went from 50,000 to like 10,000. They wouldn't unionize Southern West Virginia until FDR's New Deal during the Great Depression. And as for the people that participated in the battle, the government wasn't too happy with them either. Initially, passions were really high and they wanted to arrest everyone they could, but that became difficult because it was hard to tell how many people actually participated in the gunfight versus were just around it and maybe provided supplies. And again, some people were forced at gunpoint to be a part of the fight. Initially, they threw out indictments on 985 people, but almost all of those fell off instantly. And ultimately, only a handful of people were experiencing any real charges. Those charges, however, were treason. For one, it was very smart of Keeney and Mooney to get out of Dodge when they did. Since they weren't there for the actual battle, they weren't able to be charged with anything, at least related to this. However, people like Bill Blizzard and a few of the more well-known organizers were charged with treason against the state of West Virginia. However, as their trial began, this presented an issue for the prosecution, because according to the West Virginia Constitution, quote, treason against the state shall consist only in levying war against it or in adhering to its enemies against the state shall consist only in levying war against it or in adhering to its enemies, giving them aid and comfort. No person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of 2 witnesses to the same overt act or on confession in open court. Now, no one's arguing that they didn't commit violent acts. That is very clear. But it was not against the state of West Virginia. It was against the coal companies and agents acting on their behalf. Sure, the agents were supplied with state assets, but these strikers, as the defense argued, went all the way to the Capitol, and when they didn't get what they wanted, turned around and left. If they had staged and started the Battle of Blair Mountain in downtown Charleston, then yeah, that would probably be treason. But it was very clear their beef was not with the government, it was with the companies. As the New York Times declared while covering the trial, quote, in West Virginia, indictments for treason seem to be thrown about as carelessly as if they were indictments for the larceny of a chicken. That had to be a new sentence when it was said. Ultimately, a few men were sentenced to lighter charges related to destruction of property or violence. But by 1925, only 4 years later, everyone was out of jail. In their march, they never managed to make it to Mingo County and free the people that were being held during the strike. But as passions cooled, all of them were released as well. While initially the Battle of Blair Mountain served as a discredit to the Union and the workers whose condition was so terrible it pushed them to this place, as our retrospect grew, history saw it as a desperate people. And because of that desperation and the determination of what they did, things got better. As mentioned, 15 years later during the New Deal, Southern West Virginia was unionized. And as technology and methods and practices got better, mine workers were paid a comparatively better wage, and the occupation fell away from the death sentence that it once was. As Sid Hatfield's tombstone reads, he, along with many of the other protesters, were defenders of the rights of the working people, defenders that we should never forget. The Battle of Blair Mountain is a fascinating point in history, one that's hard to imagine given where we are now. And maybe you feel that it's something worth remembering, or maybe just a cool story, and either way, I just want to say thank you for watching. The Battle of Blair Mountain Mountain is such a strange tale. Growing up in coal country, I would hear like whispers about it from time to time. People would make jokes about, oh, well, if, the company keeps this up, they're going to have a Blair Mountain on their hands. And of course, it just served as a testament of resolve for the people. People who were so desperate and afraid that this cycle of death was going to keep going that they were ready to die for it right now. It's such a fascinating story and one that I really wanted to talk about. And again, thank you all for listening to me yap about it. There's a lot of people who talk about the Battle of Blair Mountain online, but they just talk about the battle like they opened with. And then there were a group of like miners who were really mad at the coal company, so they start marching from Charleston, and it's like, whoa, why why were they in Charleston in the first place? Who's Mother Jones? Who's Sid Hatfield? Like, I think it makes more sense as a continuous narrative, and hopefully it was interesting and not a complete bore. Yeah, this is just a fascinating story, one I wanted to talk about, and again, thank you all for being here. As mentioned at the beginning of the video, the Brainwash collection is...
Thank you for watching. My name is GameZar. You're listening to the GameZar broadcast. I appreciate you for tuning in. We're going to take a little breather as we watch another video.
What is the location of the emergency?
4748 France Court.
Is this a police or medical?
My boyfriend is dead.
Okay, send the line for the fire department. Do not hang up.
Fire risk. Just tell me exactly what happened there.
My boyfriend and I were playing last night, and I put him in a case and we were playing. Like kind of hide and seek kind of thing. So I fell asleep, and I woke up, and he was dead in the suitcase, so I don't know what happened.
Okay, is he hanging from somewhere or what, ma'am?
No, I pulled him out of the suitcase.
He was in a suitcase?
Yes, and I fell asleep.
Right, is he breathing?
No.
I need you to get him on the floor, flat on his back for me, okay?
I did. I tried giving him CPR.
Yeah, okay. Okay, listen to me. Lay him flat on his... Okay, ma'am, listen to me. I want you to lay him flat on his back for me on the floor.
I did.
Okay, wait.
He's stiff and purple.
Okay, ma'am, that's fine. We're still going to do compressions on him, okay? Place the heel of your hand on his breastbone, right in the center of the chest.
Yes.
Put your other hand on top of that hand.
If I look at him, you can tell.
Okay.
Please! Okay, he just gurgled.
Okay, listen to me. Place the heel of your hand right between his chest, right between his breastbones.
Yes.
Put the other hand on top of that hand.
Yes,
we want to pump his chest to me hard and fast, twice per second. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Who for now?
Oh, right there. This is 42-year-old Sarah Boone, who you just heard on the 911 call a few seconds ago. Her boyfriend was 42-year-old George Torres Jr., who she locked inside a suitcase the night before, ultimately leading to him dying of suffocation. Sarah's explanation is that it was a totally unintentional and unforeseen accident, but what she's completely unaware of at this particular moment is the fact she recorded 2 videos on her phone last night, the first of which was taken at 11:12 p.m., and shows her laughing at George while he's zipped up in the suitcase. But George isn't laughing. He's asking to be let out and repeatedly stating that he can't breathe. The second video was recorded 11 minutes later, showing the same thing, except the suitcase was flipped over and in a different area of the apartment. Sarah is both unmistakably and heavily intoxicated in these videos, which may explain the fact she didn't delete them. It would be safe to assume that she has no idea the videos exist. And yes, you will see the moment she becomes aware of their existence. But we first have to acknowledge how this episode was even possible, and that would be the Law and Crime Network. They sent us the uncompressed documents that comprise this video, and almost every case we have covered, or will cover, is already available in its raw form on this channel, which includes the 2 main items of public record in the case of Sarah Boone, starting with the body cam footage, which is right where we left off.
Hello there. I had a cigarette loo. Get it for you, okay? Wait 1 second, okay? I really need something to drink. Okay, well, I got my Dr. Pepper on the counter. Okay, we'll take care of you. Give me 1 second. What's going on? Sorry, I just got
here, so fill me in.
No problem. Like, he and I were putting a puzzle together. We've been doing some artwork together.
You are putting a puzzle together?
Yes, we have a puzzle that we started in there.
Okay.
Like, having a good time with one another. But we're drinking. We had a bottle of wine last night.
Okay.
So then it's like, we decided to play hide and seek, right?
Okay.
So he gets in the suitcase. Okay.
Who is this guy?
That's my ex-husband. My former husband.
How did he live here with you guys?
No. I called him over here.
Okay, okay.
I didn't know what to do.
Here, let's talk in private, okay?
I called you guys. All we had was a bottle of wine. Literally, just a bottle of wine.
Okay.
Doing puzzle artwork. Then we decided to play hide and seek. That's all that happened.
Okay, okay. Here, let me fill this deputy in, okay?
Please, may I have my Dr. Pepper? I am so cotton mouse right now. It's on the counter.
I can't move it. Please come out of the house.
I'm so thirsty. Like, I'm
Here, I want you to sit down because I don't want you passing out. This is probably a lot for you to deal with, right? Sit.
May I have water? Just water.
I can get you some water, okay?
The officer then talks to Sarah's ex-husband.
About 11:30 is when I started calling to find out because this is supposed to be her day.
He referred to the fact that Sarah was meant to have custody of their son today.
She's generally not very good about always doing it.
They called back and said she was still there, or she came back to the
so I was
post
calling to
office.
find out if she was going to be getting him or not today.
Cool.
Yes.
Okay.
Got over here, told her she needed to call 911, get somebody over here, and then basically she said she needed to go outside, have a drink and a cigarette. But
I need water really bad.
I called her.
Give me 1 second, okay?
He's currently on parole because of it, so...
Because of domestic violence with her?
Yes.
Okay.
He explains that George has been arrested for domestic violence multiple times against Sarah, and that Sarah's literally bailed him out every time.
I don't know what it is.
Oh, she's getting water from this tap. Probably gonna pass out on us. Okay, well, listen.
The police officer asks the ex-husband to stick around for a little while longer. She then gets a notepad and returns to Sarah to collect more information.
At some point, you put him in the suitcase?
No, he got in the suitcase. So he thought it would be funny to be put in the suitcase. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to joke with you and I'll zip you up and make him, squirm a little bit, whatever it is. But then I fell asleep. I fell asleep.
Where was the suitcase?
Right where it is.
In it. Right down there?
Yes.
You zipped him in there?
Yes.
Thought he would be funny, a little joke.
It was. We both were laughing about it. And then I fell asleep.
Where did you fall asleep at?
Upstairs. I just totally forgot.
So you began to do CPR on him?
Yes. Yes.
About what time this morning did you start doing that CPR?
No, it was the afternoon. And air was coming out and he was gurgling, but I could just tell by looking at him.
But you knew how to do CPR? You were doing that on your own?
Yes.
Okay. I want you to sit back down because I don't want
Can I have one more sip of water, please?
Yeah, go.
Can I have a cigarette, please?
Ma'am, I can't take anything out of the house.
It's on the back porch.
Nope, all of it is secure, okay?
The officer then confirms the ex-husband will be taking custody of the child.
And your child is in school right now. He's not here with you.
No. He's at school.
He's in school. How old is he?
This would be a fun one. He's 9. He's third grade.
I can't even start with how you would explain something like this. Okay.
The ex-husband leaves, and the officers wait for investigators to arrive.
Can I please have a cigarette? They're on the back porch.
Not right now. We can't have you go and get anything. Why don't you sit in the shade?
The investigators then arrive.
Hey, Sarah. You get enough water? No, if you want to stay seated, I don't want you getting lightheaded. So remember I said the detectives were going to come out and talk to you and go from there. They're here. They're going to ask you a few questions and then go from there, okay? All right.
All right, Sarah. My name's Chelsea. My partner, Scott.
They ask Sarah what happened.
So he decided to get in the suitcase. So I thought it would be funny and he was laughing about it too, to dip him up in there. I go upstairs and fell asleep.
Like, what kind of person plays games like this? I'm sorry. I understand having, like, some weird sexual fetishes, but, like, suitcase? Suitcase?
Dip him up in there. I go upstairs and fell asleep.
Weird.
I don't know what happened.
Okay.
Granted, I'm asexual, so, like, no, I don't really understand having weird sexual fetishes.
And I both were laughing about it. I went upstairs and I fell asleep. I'm afraid for my life. I want you to know that. I am afraid for my life. His family has never liked me.
Have you called any of them?
We talked to his daughters yesterday.
No, I mean, about this. Does anyone know? Okay.
They're going to kill me.
Okay, well.
Do they live local?
Yes. They're down the road. They're going to kill me.
The detectives reassure Sarah that she's not about to get murdered, and then go in to investigate the apartment.
Just stay seated, okay, Sarah? I know you're panicking, okay? Just relax. We'll come and talk to you. We'll keep checking on you.
This police officer was brilliant. Her temperament was perfect for the situation. The investigators simply asked Sarah to stay somewhere else for the night, and to come to the police station the following day with any questions she might have. Sarah stayed with her ex-husband, then showed up at the sheriff's office the next day at 3:51 p.m. with an entire handwritten page of questions, the first of which was about when she's getting back her phone.
I'm gonna have you sit in the green chair that doesn't move. Appreciate you coming in. Yes, ma'am.
Sarah takes out her page of questions, which the investigator semi-acknowledges, then brushes off.
So obviously, he received his autopsy. So I'm going to read you your rights again because we have to talk about that. Has anyone threatened you or promised you? Yes. Perfect. Okay.
Sarah has no idea what just happened.
This morning we went to his autopsy, and we were informed of some injuries that he has by the doctor. So he had some injuries to his left shoulder. He had a cut near his lip. We could see his mouth was a little.
I haven't laid a hand on him.
Okay.
Forensics have since proven that George sustained his injuries the night he died, and he didn't have them before entering the apartment.
Also, too, he fell off my son's bike.
Okay.
So I don't know. And he's notorious for running into the wall or the hall tree. So
Okay.
The investigator details further injuries, including a contusion on his neck.
And they're all recent. Like they occurred recently. It wasn't something that occurred post or that occurred a week ago or 2 days ago, 3 days ago. They definitely occurred, the night leading up to when he was.
In all honesty, we have not gotten into it. I have no idea what it is. No idea what it is. We had a good time sitting on the back porch, having wine, and smoking a couple of cigarettes, and then decided to go inside and literally paint, do puzzles, and play, and listen to music. That's why.
She had all night to set this up, which is the issue. For all we know, she could have designed this entire scene of events from scratch. There is a 12-hour gap between the timestamp on her videos to the moment police showed up on her doorstep, which is plenty of time to assemble what looks like a very pleasant scene of events that in no way precipitated a drunken act of revenge that ultimately led to murder.
Nobody got out of sorts. This is what's mind-blowing to me. I have no clue. Nobody laid a hand on anybody.
He also had, on the left side of his forehead, he had basically bruising, and on his head and skull.
I have no idea.
As if something hit him.
I
consider
not touched him.
Trauma.
I have not touched him. I have not touched him. I have no idea. We had a good day. It was a good day. We've had days lately. It's been good. I don't even know where this is coming from.
The interrogator now brings up Sarah's last call to police, reporting domestic violence.
You said a month ago he hit you with a curtain rod.
Yeah, with a curtain rod. That's why I can't believe you guys didn't take that either.
She just referred to the fact that George didn't face charges for the alleged assault.
We've been good. I don't know if, it's since the last time he got out of jail. We've been good, and he's been having his classes.
What do you mean by good? What's your definition of good?
The probation officer?
Oh, no, you said you guys have been good. What's your definition?
I've been good. I don't think you all understand. He comes at me all the time. He comes at me. So it's either I flee or try to go upstairs and go to sleep. That's usually what it is. And I don't know if you talk to Brian about any of that, but most of the time when I flee, I go over there. So
Sarah is detailing possible motives for retaliation. Routine procedure would be to keep her train of thought locked on this element, provide encouragement and understanding while inquiring further into the suspect's grievances with the victim. The only problem is that the lead interrogator really doesn't like Sarah, and abandons the task of pretending to, which makes this a significantly flawed, yet remarkably entertaining process to bear witness.
Right, but you're saying that you guys have been good, and when I asked you yesterday, the last incident that you could remember was the curtain rod incident, which you said was a month ago, so...
Give or take.
Right.
The investigator challenges an earlier assertion which remodels the discourse, and the suspect then starts defending her relationship with the victim.
You know, this channel fell off because they started making content with AI,
and I feel like I can help him.
Is so
He
sad.
came a really
Their
long way,
older
and he
content
was
is
trying.
way better. That's why we're watching their older videos.
She somehow transitions into the principle of how she doesn't normally drink, and it's kind of only because of George that she drinks at all.
The occasional
is really,
wine,
really good.
whatever, or if it's a weekend. That's when you have a good time. You don't have to wake up the next day. I have to wake up the next day and do things. I can do 50 things at once and still know the 50 things more prior that I need to get done. He can't process like that. He didn't process like that. So the next thing you know, he doesn't want to deal with it. I'm going to go get something to drink. Nobody knew George better than I did. I say that I knew George better than himself. And I tried in every way, shape, and form. Ask everyone. I helped him. I took care of him.
Sarah talks about George's anger management classes and the supposed progress he was making.
And would always come home and show me his papers. And we would look over his papers together. Where it's like, wow, you actually are learning this in class? And some of the stuff that they would show them, like videos, he would come home and be like, Sarah, I'm so sorry for what I've done to you. He changed. And that's why you're still with him, even though he's done all these things to you. And when I tell you I love him, I love him.
When you love somebody, you have limits.
Everybody tells me that.
At some point, somebody gets enough.
In the next moment, the detective will say, then they have to do something to defend themselves. Sarah's temperament will completely switch at the completion of this sentence.
Then they have to do something to defend themselves.
I would just flee, and I don't know if you would like to see it on my phone, or I think it's actually on a laptop.
She explains how she once filed a restraining order against George, then for some reason brings up his ex-wife.
When I say a monster, she's a monster. Like it does,
The interrogator lets her vent about the ex-wife for 2 minutes. She will now bring the focus back to the investigation. Back to the investigation.
Since talking yesterday, do you remember any like timelines better? Like what time you guys were playing? What time he was zipped up in the luggage? What time you went upstairs?
We started because we cleaned the house a little bit, did some laundry.
She recalls the game starting at around 4 p.m. and her going to sleep at around midnight.
So I have 4 and I have midnight, so there's a big gap. So I'm just curious, like, if you recall when you went upstairs to hide in the shower, or...
Like when we started to play, hide and seek, yeah. Well, we went inside probably about, if I had to guess, we weren't out there too long. Worked on the puzzle again, finished it. Started to paint. Well, started listening to music for a little bit. Started to paint. Can we turn the music off? No problem. Started at the top, paint, whatever. I don't want to paint anymore. Let's just, come on. Okay, you want to play hide and seek? What he does is, okay, tag, you're it. So it's like, okay, we know. Okay, take off.
That's not how you play hide and seek.
Yeah. That's what we did.
Have you guys ever played you said you played hide and seek like probably 3 times in your relationship.
Mm-hmm.
When you have played, have you ever zipped him up in a suitcase prior?
No.
Okay.
The suitcase originally is in our closet, buried all the way to the back. If you, I know the CSI people saw our closet. Our closet needs to be cleaned out really bad. My son's clothes need to be cleaned out really bad because they don't fit him anymore, and I'm tired of looking at them. So he took it upon himself, including that suitcase, to take it downstairs so we can get all of our clothes, our donations and everything, and just leave the whole thing by the clothing and shoe thing at my son's school.
Gotcha. No, I'm just asking, in the past, like, have you ever zipped him up in anything, jokingly or not?
God damn it.
But obviously I understand, you know, you're claiming that Sunday it was a joking matter. You were laughing, he was laughing. But what I'm just asking is in the past, like, is it something that you guys normally do?
Every time I try and cook something, my fire alarm goes off.
Okay, so do you remember making any videos or maybe having any photos, videos that you remember doing on your phone on Sunday? No.
I think I took a picture of a dog.
Okay. So I have
You don't know how annoying it is trying to cook. And my fire, it's not even the fire alarm, the smoke detector
With regard to
near
the colossal
oven. I
realm
have
of
two
interrogation
smoke
footage,
detectors.
the level of notoriety
It's
these
the
next
one
moments
that's
acquired
near my
is virtually
bedroom,
unprecedented.
Not even the one
I
near
feel like
my
this picture
oven.
belongs
I
on a wall
freaking
somewhere.
hate it. I hate it. I'm glad that I caught that on camera so people can understand my pain.
Can you around? Go ahead.
Trying to cook some hot dogs in the oven.
No, I don't remember that.
For everything you've done to me. For everything you've done to me.
Your battery's about to die.
Shut it down.
Oh.
The oven's not even that hot.
Let me.
There's no smoke
Sarah
in the
may have
house
been
or
hoping
anything
that that
like
was the end of it. Really can't say that I blame her
what's
for
going
that.
on.
Is it long? Because I don't know how much I can take. I don't know how much I can take.
I don't know how to find her.
Do I have to watch this? I continuously throw up. I don't sleep. I don't want to see it, if that's okay.
You can either explain it or we take it for what it is.
Yeah. We're just trying to give you the opportunity to tell us what's going on. That's it.
It's that long?
2 minutes.
For everything you've done to me. For everything you've done to me. Fuck you. Stupid. Sarah. That's my name. Don't wear it on. Sarah.
I don't want to watch it, please.
That's him saying that he can't breathe, and you saying fuck
So
you.
this is upside down.
The interrogators should not be cutting each other off, but their missteps can be forgiven on this occasion due to the power of the evidence, which the lead detective will now focus on.
Guys, this is killing me right now.
So this image is upside down, and then this small video that occurred 11 minutes later, it's flipped over the other way, closer to your dining room table.
Okay.
Now he's obviously still in there. So he didn't, how did it go from the back to the front?
I flipped it.
Okay.
My plan was not to go upstairs and go to sleep.
Well, that's what you did.
Yeah.
But not intentional.
No, you told me you went upstairs because you were getting ready for bed.
Just to be clear, Sarah still has no idea how screwed she is. She just referred to an earlier statement that she didn't lock up the suitcase all the way, so George could get out.
Stop here.
Okay, but
Where's here?
show me where you can see any fingers coming out.
And his head's right here.
Mm-hmm.
So going like this, it's like this.
But why is he saying I can't breathe, and why is he pushing on it as if he can't get out?
And it doesn't show a hole.
There's no hole. There's no fingers. I don't see his fingers. There's no hole.
I don't know what you want me to tell you. Like, I don't know, like, what you want me to tell you.
I'm just telling you what we see and what we've heard from the other video.
I understand.
He's begging for you to let him out. You're laughing in the beginning, and then in the end it sounds kind of like a...
No, it's not malicious.
Well, saying fuck you.
It's not malicious.
Then what is that?
My intention was not to leave him in there. Please understand that. My intention was not to leave him in there.
This video is at 11:12 when it starts, so was he in there for like a long time prior to recording this?
No.
I think we've all gathered by now that Sarah might be twisting the truth in her favor a little bit. She seems to have forgotten that 2 minutes ago she claimed to have no recollection of this incident, so her impeccable memory all of a sudden seems rather selective.
But I didn't think that he was, like, panicky. Like,
So pushing up on a suitcase saying, Sarah, 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 I can't breathe. And you're the only one laughing.
Okay.
And you're the only one saying derogatory comments. Like you're mad.
No. Please don't, I don't mean to sound negative, and I don't know if I can say this, but, like, it's like you guys are kind of trying to, like, feed me.
The interesting thing about Sarah is that her intuition is correct. She sort of recognizes what the police are doing here, but still has no idea of the ramifications. Her energy resembles that of someone who feels the police are about to start rumors about her.
No, I'm just trying to show you a video that you no longer want to watch because you probably don't want to know the outcome of how and what you said.
My plan was not to go upstairs and go to sleep. My plan was not to, he'll be up here any minute.
But you willingly went upstairs and went to sleep. No one forced you to go upstairs and get
My
ready
plan
for
wasn't
bed.
also to leave him in the suitcase.
So why didn't you take him out?
Because I went upstairs and then I fell asleep.
But why didn't you consciously think he's asking to come out?
I didn't do it intentionally.
What do you think is going to happen if you leave somebody in a confined space like that?
Well, I thought by not zipping it up all the way, it would be okay. My plan was not to leave him in the
What was
suitcase.
your plan?
Waiting for him to come upstairs. I thought it was like, I thought he was okay. Like I didn't, that, you all.
He's telling you he's not. He's telling you, Sarah, I can't breathe. He's saying your name and you're like, that's my name, don't wear it out.
Guys, that's how we are with each other. The whole suitcase thing never happened before.
Sarah tries to move on to another topic, but the interrogator doesn't allow it and brings her back to the specifics of the evidence.
Again, his head is closer to us facing the video, so we should be able to see fingers, and we don't see anything. We see no movement of him trying to unzip it or physically unzipping it. All we see is pushing up, trying to push out of it.
Please do not assume.
I mean, you put him in, so why didn't you take him out?
Because I was upstairs and I fell asleep.
No, before you went upstairs. You, like, consciously had to walk upstairs. You obviously remember going to bed because you were able to give me a time frame on that. And you specifically told me that you went upstairs.
My intention is not for this to happen. I am sick about it. I've never done anything like this before in the past. I am sick.
The lead interrogator starts playing the video as Sarah is mid-sentence reiterating her innocence.
I don't know. I don't know what you all want me to tell you because this was not in any way, shape, or form.
You admit to moving the suitcase, like, over. So you roll it over. Like, it's not like...
I didn't want it to be like that.
You didn't want him to be upside down? How do you even get upside down?
You guys are killing me right now. I don't know how you want me to say it. I didn't mean to leave him in there.
Okay.
What's your reasoning for not calling 911 sooner?
Because I didn't know what to do and how horrific it was. I called Ryan, and 5 minutes later I called you guys? Not even 5 minutes. And they was continually doing CPR with the dispatch on the phone.
So when he asked to be let out, what's your reasoning for not letting him out?
When I was upstairs?
No, when he's asking on the video. He asked multiple times. He asked to be let out. I can't breathe. Why didn't you let him out?
Well, number one, I had no idea it was going to end like that.
Okay.
Number one.
Okay.
Number two, just, you know what? I'll give you 5 minutes or so in there. They'll give you 5 minutes or so.
5 minutes for what?
This was an absolutely imperative moment to allow the suspect to elaborate, but the lead interrogator cuts her off.
Well, based off the video, one video's at 11:12 and the next one's at 11:23, so you actually gave him at least 11 minutes per video recording. So my thing is, when it stopped, he asked multiple times, why? Why did you not let him out? It's just a simple question.
To be honest with you,
Were you punishing him? Well, that's what's in the video.
This is what you get. This is what you make me feel like.
It's all hard on me. I will never drink alcohol again. I don't care what it is, any way, shape, or form.
Let's get this. When he's for his life telling you he can't breathe, let me out, and you say, why don't you let him out? What are you trying to tell him? There was obviously in your head that you were he was not letting you out. You're like,
again, the boy and wolf. And it's not fair. It is not fair. Guys are trying to, again, he's in there.
He's begging for something he can't breathe.
I don't know what you want me to tell you. Like, I don't. I didn't intentionally mean for it to happen.
But the question is why you let him out prior to going?
I don't know why.
He's begging to out. He's not laughing. He's having fun.
So are you guys, so what is it you're trying to, like,
Trying to figure out why.
Why? What?
Why?
What was the motive for leaving him in the bag?
Why he was left in the bag? Why the video?
I didn't have any motivation. It was me, he and I having a great day, fooling around and being stupid.
You know, it's a good enough for the day, excluding the fact that he's got a bump on the back of his head, a bump on the front of his head, and his lip is busted, and he has a
Oh my
bump on his
God.
mouth. I mean,
I don't know what you all want me to tell you. Like, this is that you all are assuming that from me.
where else?
You were saying that you were in the suits and you're asking to be let out. Should let you out?
Yes. I'm guessing. I don't. I'm hanging it on the one.
After talking to you, everything was laughing and fun. Now we're watching the video, not laughing and fun. He's begging for it, and you are an angry voice telling him to off.
No. It's fair that you guys keep trying to say that that is it.
And
if he could open, why wouldn't he have gotten out? Why would he beg you to open it?
I tell you, he can't breathe.
Okay.
If they can do something for themselves to do it, they don't need assistance.
Lay hands on each other.
No. No. I don't have anything.
You're right. Yes, that we're assuming that what we're simply doing is what we see and being told.
I understand. Because I don't remember.
Doesn't mean it happened just because you don't remember it.
Sarah now gets freaked, the male detective. She thinks texting someone about her, which creates third yet hilarious.
So is the texting thing something like what's
the what? Texting? Oh no,
I have one question. You're the real live person that killed him, right?
What about that?
Okay, you left him in when he's begging you, saying, I agree, let me out. You said, fuck you.
Not intentionally.
You went up to bed.
Oh, listen to me. I not intentionally kill him.
I got you on video screaming, fuck you.
This is what it feels like when you're choking me. There's still feelings towards it. You wouldn't say it if you didn't feel it.
And then you flipped the bag around several times.
I didn't do that intentionally.
You didn't intentionally flip the bag around?
No. Why would I do that?
Well, you
Good
told us
question,
you
you
did.
When he was upside down.
Right.
Well, you had to put him upside down.
You can't get in a suitcase upside down because
it had to have been on his back with the lid open for him to get in there, for you to zip it up. Then it shows it on the other side with him in it, so you had to flip it to there. Then there's another video where it's on his back again, so you had to flip it
I'm
there.
leaving it like this, please. I'm leaving it like this. I did not intentionally do this.
You left him in there. You didn't try to dance around the fact. You left him in there.
This is not.
You didn't leave him in there?
It's not cool. Like, this is not cool.
It's not cool. You intentionally left him in there and left the room. You went upstairs to a different room.
She should have lawyered up like an hour and a half ago, bro.
Well, you gave up checking up on him. So.
I wouldn't let him out of a suitcase.
Oh, gosh.
Anybody looking at it, I don't think anybody would look at that video and go, George is having fun right now.
The discourse repeats itself a few more times, and then Sarah brings out her list of questions.
So, am I getting my phone back? No.
Not today.
What about Lucas's laptop?
No.
Not today.
Not today.
How do I go about getting his wedding ring, engagement ring?
It's at the medical examiner's office. It'll come to us eventually, and then
It'll be released to the next of kin.
Yeah. Okay.
I bought it for him.
Okay. That is a civil issue. It was on his finger. It goes to them. They're the ones that are going to release it. We don't have any say in that.
So I won't get that back.
So, what's next?
They're going to come and swab your fingers.
No, I'm talking about, like, in the long run. Like, what do I need to, like, do I need to be doing something, or, like...
You should have lawyered up.
I can't tell you, like, what to do.
I mean, like, so, like, for... Like, I don't understand, like, I don't know if you guys are just gonna, like... I'm not admitting anything about being intentional, and I... Like...
We told you everything that we have. You know everything that we know.
So after this, what? I'm done? In itself, for me to have to live with getting him out and doing what I did is punishment enough. Nonetheless, I have to live without him now.
His daughters, too.
Are you trying to make it worse?
Sorry, what?
Are you trying to make it worse?
CSI, that was there yesterday.
Forensics take her DNA and fingerprints. The investigators then return.
Okay, Sarah. So, you're not free to go. Okay.
This comment seriously puts Sarah on edge, but she still won't quite be fully aware of what's happening. This is coupled with the fact the investigators now try to get a solemn declaration out of her to close out the interrogation. The psychological dynamics of the moment are extraordinary.
Do you promise everything you told us was the truth? Or no? Everything we've talked about today?
Yes. What do you mean?
The investigator explains that it's just protocol.
Do you promise and swear that everything we've talked about today has been true and accurate to the best of your knowledge?
To the best of my knowledge?
Correct. Yes.
Why?
Because anytime we talk to somebody,
The male detective re-explains that it's just routine, only in a far more comforting tone. But the tone doesn't do a whole lot to reassure Sarah. She looks about ready to get swallowed up by a wormhole and take her chances in a separate dimension.
It's not a trick question.
To the best of my knowledge?
To the best of your knowledge.
Everything that you've told us today is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge.
Yes, but it was not intentional.
Okay. Okay.
All right, do me a favor, stand up. I need you to turn around, face the wall. Put your hands behind your back. Do you have anything in your pocket?
So this was a trick?
You were read your rights.
Why is it happening?
Because...
Before y'all said I could leave. So what am I supposed to do now? I had a sneaky suspicion this was going to happen. And I need water, like, really bad, please.
How's she?
You need a lawyer.
You all check me down here.
An officer comes to take Sarah to the jail, but Sarah has questions first.
Those holding cells? The holding cells? Am I going to be put in one of those?
I don't know.
Last time I had a panic attack.
Okay. Let them know that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Go ahead, stand up.
I have not.
So what am I going to do with my purse? What made you all decide to do this?
Made us decide to do this?
Uh-huh.
George is dead.
You guys, I knew this was going to happen.
You did?
Sarah was taken to the Orange County Jail at 5:44 p.m. She was charged with second-degree murder and held without bond, which, keep in mind, was in late February of 2020, just before the entire planet went into lockdown due to a pandemic. So Sarah must have had a real fun time getting acclimated to the new environment. She's been in the county jail since, with a trial date set for April 10th of this year. She's currently working with her 7th attorney. 6 have already filed motions to get the fuck out of there, and all of them cited the same reason, which was irreconcilable differences.
Treat yourself to more NFL games this holiday season. NFL Sunday Ticket is now...
Hello, everybody. Today we are going to be talking about the true story of the assassination of civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. Along with the assassination of John F. Kennedy, this is one of the most highlighted examples of state corruption and conspiracy in all of American history. So I thought that we would take a look at the information today, and I can tell you why I myself, as well as the family of Martin Luther King, do not believe that James Earl Ray was the shooter. And furthermore, why in 1999, the King family sued the government for a wrongful death and conspiracy to kill Martin Luther King Jr. and won. Which, let me highlight now to cover all of my bases. These are all jokes. Everything that I'm saying is a joke. This is all irony and satire and in Minecraft. And if I ever unalive myself, no, I didn't. But before we get into that big pile of awful, let's talk about something not awful, like saving money. Specifically, saving the... Well, you can say all you have to do with the channel, but helps me, again, link in the description. On the same page, I'm going to start by giving the FBI's official account of what happened, and then after that, I'll explain why it's all a lie. As a joke, of course. For starters, Martin Luther King Jr. was a civil rights leader who was not only an effective speaker and leader within the civil rights movement, but was also no stranger to death threats. As a matter of fact, in 1958, he was stabbed in the chest and was nearly killed, and in 1963, after the assassination of John F. Kennedy, he told his wife, Coretta King, quote, "This is what's going to happen to me also. I keep telling you this is a sick society." King would also travel with other members of his organization, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and go to different cities across the U.S. where King would speak at different rallies and protests. In 1968, King, along with a group of members from that association, came to Memphis, Tennessee as part of a sanitation workers rally. Now, there had been a long history of black city workers within Memphis, Tennessee being underpaid and put into harsh labor conditions. However, the event that sparked this particular rally was the death of 2 sanitation workers who died while on the job, and their family was not given any insurance payout for their death. So King led a march in Memphis on March the 28th, and then planned to lead another march after that during the following week. On April 3rd, King stood in front of the Mason Temple in Memphis, Tennessee, and gave his famous "I've been to the mountaintop" speech.
To do God's will, and He's allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.
The next day, on April the 4th of 1968, King was staying in room 306 of the Lorraine Motel. Another pastor who traveled with King, a man by the name of Ralph Abernathy, said that they stayed in that specific room so often whenever they visited Memphis that it was nicknamed the King Abernathy Suite. The group was getting ready to go to dinner before King was set to deliver another speech that night, and his final words, officially at least, were to the musician Ben Branch, in which King said, "Ben, make sure you play Take My Hand, Precious Lord in the meeting tonight. Play it real pretty." King then leaned over the balcony on the second floor of the Lorraine Motel to speak to Jesse Jackson, who was standing in the parking lot beneath. At that moment, at 6:01 p.m., a shot rang out which struck King in the right cheek. It immediately broke his jaw and several vertebrae while severing the veins and arteries in his neck. King was immediately knocked out. However, one of his colleagues, who was holding his head as he was bleeding, found that he had a pulse, and he was immediately taken to the St. Joseph's Hospital. However, there, Martin Luther King was officially declared dead at 7:05 p.m. on April the 4th of 1968. The police were quick to arrive on scene and concluded that the shot had been fired from the bathroom window of a boarding house across the street from the Lorraine Motel. Immediately next to the boarding house, the police found a bed sheet which contained someone's personal clothing and a sort of overnight bag, as well as a Remington 760 Game Master rifle. Within the pump-action .30-06 was an empty rifle casing, indicating that someone had fired the gun and not ejected the old casing. The rifle, as well as the belongings in the bed sheet, were covered in the fingerprints of someone identified as James Earl Ray. James Earl Ray was an escaped convict from Jackson City, Missouri, who was arrested and serving 20 years for robbing a grocery store before he broke out of jail. Not only that, but in the aforementioned boarding house, one of the rooms was being rented by James Earl Ray. He was on the run for 2 months before he was caught in London at the Heathrow Airport as he was trying to board a plane to Rhodesia. After his arrest on March the 10th
Sure,
of
he was a very
1969,
suspicious
Ray,
guy.
in order to avoid the death penalty, pleaded guilty to
But
the
that's
first-degree murder of MLK. The FBI concluded that the reason for this murder was that James Earl Ray was poor and there was a bounty put out by racist Southerners for the killing of Martin Luther King Jr. In a book titled He Slew the Dreamer, which came out shortly after the death of MLK, the author says that James Earl Ray was a very racist and hateful person who was trying to collect a bounty from members of the KKK for the murder of MLK. So this all sounds pretty cut and dry, right? A civil rights leader was killed by a racist person trying to collect a bounty, and his fingerprints were found on all the stuff, and he pleaded guilty to it, right? No, and here's why. 3 days after he confessed to first-degree murder, Ray fired his attorney and said that his attorney told him that if he does not immediately confess to killing MLK, they'll either give him the death penalty or someone will kill him quicker.
Came in with the paper, one of the signing saying that, we'd enter a guilty plea. He gave me a list of reasons why we should enter a plea. He also said the newspaper done convicted me by pretrial publicity. And so I told him I didn't think that was the grounds for entering a guilty plea because I thought we could overcome some of this adverse publicity during the trial. His next gambit was that if I didn't enter a guilty plea, they might put my brother Jerry Ray in prison as a co-conspirator. He also indicated that if I
but he's going to get into that. He's going to get into that.
Through
We're not
his
there
new
yet.
attorney, William Pepper,
We're not there yet.
Ray said that he believes he accidentally assisted with the murder of Martin Luther King Jr., and he believes that he himself was a victim in a larger conspiracy. In the following years, there were several requests for Ray to have a retrial, although for reasons we'll get into in a bit, none of those really panned out. And there was no significant headway made in the case until the King family themselves, who had been doing their own research to the side, came to the conclusion that James Earl Ray was an innocent man, or at least innocent for killing King. He still robbed a grocery store, but I don't really think that matters at this point. In 1997, Dexter King, the son of Martin Luther King, went to the Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary in order to meet James Earl Ray. Whenever the two met, Dexter said, "I just want to know, for the record, did you kill my father?" To which James Earl Ray replied, no, I didn't. And Dexter said, I know, and my whole family knows. Over the next few years, the King family fought vehemently for James Earl Ray to get a retrial. And in 1999, Coretta King, the wife of Martin Luther King, along with her family, sued Lloyd Jowers, which I'll explain who he is in a little bit, along with the entirety of the federal government for committing a conspiracy to murder MLK, to which, as I mentioned earlier, they won the case. The case took place in Shelby County, Tennessee, and the lawyer that represented the King family was William Pepper, the aforementioned second attorney for James Earl Ray. During the case, Pepper brought in over 70 witnesses and 4,000 pages of transcripts, to which, according to him, in those transcripts, those who were a part of the conspiracy were the FBI, the CIA, the U.S. Army, the Memphis Police Department, and the Mafia. The jury unanimously ruled in the King's family favor and awarded them $100. The reason it was $100 is because the Kings were very adamant that it was not about the money, it was just about proving that the government had something to do with Martin's murder. However, if this was justice for the King family, it didn't come soon enough for James Earl Ray, who died a year earlier in 1998 in prison due to an injury he received during a prison fight. So it seems like there's two completely stories happening here. On one hand, you have the pretty straightforward story of some racist whack job getting a rifle, killing Martin Luther King, and then getting arrested for it. But on the other side, you have the King family trying to get this guy out of jail, and then you have a lawyer who was an expert on both sides of the case, who then comes into court, brings all this evidence, and ends up winning with a jury saying that, yeah, the government definitely did it. So how are there two completely different things happening? That lawsuit, and for reasons I'll get into, 100% agree with the King family as well as the civil court ruling. Of course, as a joke, this is all satire. So in order to break all this down, let's look at the specific moments leading up to and during the shooting itself. The night before Martin Luther King was shot, James Earl Ray rented a room above a place known as Jim's Grill in a boarding house owned by a Bessie Brewer. The official story is that he stayed in the room that night, and then the next day he took his rifle down the hall to a communal bathroom that had a good view of the Lorraine Motel. He stood in the bathtub and fired the shot, and then jumped out, didn't eject the shell casing, ran back to his room and threw the rifle as well as his bag of clothes into the bedsheet, threw it all together with the bedsheet, put it on his back, and then ran out into the hall. He was then spotted by a man named Charles Quitman Stevens, who was the state's lead witness in this entire case. Charles said that he saw a man running out of the hotel, and he later ID'd it as James Earl Ray. Again, according to official reports, James Earl Ray was then walking down the street whenever he saw a cop car parked across the street, to which he panicked and dropped the bedsheet in front of the aforementioned department store. He then hopped into his white Mustang and sped away down the street. So to give a little illustration of it, this is not remotely drawn to scale or whatever, so I'm sorry, I promise I'm trying. The distance from the bathroom window, which is right here, to the spot King was at the motel was about 70 or 80 yards. According to that story, Ray was sitting in the bathroom window and fired his shot across the street at the motel balcony where King was staying. Everything here is taking place on the second floor of the building. So then Ray goes down the hallway into his room, gathers his stuff, puts it in the bedsheet, goes back out and down the staircase by Jim's Grill. That's when he begins walking down the street, and here at Canop, however you pronounce it, Amusement, he sees the cop supposedly, drops his bag right here, ducks the other direction to get into his vehicle parked somewhere over here, and then speeds off down the street going that direction. So let's talk about the first big issue in this entire case, and the one that should have been a red flag to the investigators, but wasn't, again, for reasons we'll talk about. The rifle that was in the bedsheet was never matched to the bullet that hit Martin Luther King.
That Remington 760 Game Master they've got in the Civil Rights Museum is not the murder weapon. The thing the state relied upon was the rifle, but modern scientific methodology excluded that rifle from being the murder weapon. The bullet they pull out of King's body has a rate of rifling twist of 1 turn in every 11 1/4 inches. The rifle that Ray had a rate of rifling twist of 1 turn in every 10 inches and a bad manufacturing defect that is not apparent on the death slug.
For those that don't know, the way that a rifle works is within the barrel itself, there is a series of grooves that spin the bullet and allow it to have a spiral and more accurate trajectory after it comes out of the barrel. While rifling is always similar on similar model of guns, the exact combination of what happens between the chamber and the bolt and the rifling and everything else is entirely unique to every single gun. And the most conclusive evidence they could say is that both the bullet that hit King as well as Ray's gun were probably the same model of rifle. Which, yeah, there were literally millions of Remington 760s in the United States. That doesn't prove anything. The other hiccup in the story is that James Earl Ray's fingerprints were never found in his room or the bathroom that the shot was taken from. The bathroom detail can almost be looked over. If the window was already open, I could see him walking in there, standing in the tub, taking the shot, and then leaving. However, if he stayed in the room overnight, and as we're going to see in a bit, this guy was no criminal mastermind, he would have left a fingerprint or a hair or something in his wake. Furthermore, police were on the scene of the shooting within 2 minutes of whenever the shot was fired, and none of them reported ever having seen a white Mustang. This would mean that Ray would have to take the shot, run back to his room, pack his stuff, load it up, walk out of the hallway, go downstairs, go across the block, see the police, drop his bag, go the other direction, get in his car, and speed off, all within 2 minutes.
Olympic
and to cast
runner,
another
James
shadow on
Earl
that
Ray.
whole theory of what happened, Guy Canup, the guy who owned this store that James Earl Ray supposedly dropped his bag in front of, said that what happened, according to him, is someone walked up, dropped the bag in front of the store, calmly walked away, and then a couple minutes later, he heard the gunshot, meaning that that bag with the rifle that did not match the round that hit MLK, as well as James Earl Ray's personal belongings, were set up there before a shot was ever fired.
He was one of the first people to cast doubts on the state's case against Ray in his book, Cover Up.
That's ridiculous. He's required to have gone to his room in the flop house and picked up the widest collection of junk. Bobby pins. Cans of beer that hadn't been opened. You know, a guy has been a crime like that and he's fleeing for his life. You're going to pick up a couple cans of beer or a bobby pin. The box didn't hold the rifle. He had to put the rifle in that. All sorts of other junk. And a ridiculous collection of it. The one thing that bundle served to do was to point a finger at Ray.
Another issue with that story is the logistics of the shot itself. As you can see from these pictures, wherever I decide to put them, Martin Luther King was standing on the balcony where you see the white wreath. He was leaned over it talking to someone in the parking lot below. And then, as you can see, the boarding house located across the street has several windows, one of those believed to be the one where Ray took the shot. However, for the logistics of that shot to have worked out in the angle that the bullet trajectory says it did, Ray would have had to be standing on top of the bathtub and in a very awkward position. Even more so, at the time the shot would have been taken, there was a large tree just outside of the window that would have made it near impossible to see across the street to the motel, let alone get a shot through it.
I did talk to a Captain Tommy Smith, who retired as head of homicide for the Memphis Police Department, who was the first detective on the scene. He said the shot couldn't have been from the flop house. There was a limb about this thick growing diagonally through the window, and you couldn't even see the Lorraine Motel from that.
Don't worry, we'll talk about what happened to that tree in just a minute. So remember that guy, Charles Stevens, the state's lead witness, who said he saw Ray run out of the bathroom and then down the street? Well, Charles Stevens had been arrested 155 times, most of them due to alcoholism. He was known for getting drunk in public and causing a wreck, and the police would have to bring him back home. At the time of the shooting, Stevens was drunk in a stupor, and as a matter of fact, he didn't come forward to police saying that he saw Ray until a bounty was put forward for $100,000 to anyone who can give police information. The police had already found the fingerprints on the gun, which were connected to the escaped convict, and said they were looking for James Earl Ray. So Stevens comes to the police and says, yeah, that Ray guy, I saw him. During an interview with a CBS journalist, the journalist held up a picture of James Earl Ray, and Stevens said, who is that? And the journalist said, this is the shooter, James Earl Ray. And Stevens said, oh, that wasn't the guy who was running out of the hotel.
Look at that picture. Does that look like the man?
Well, excuse me, from the glimpse that I got of his profile, it doesn't.
It doesn't?
No, sir. It certainly doesn't. For one thing, he's too heavy. His face is too full. He has too much hair. And his nose is too wide. Hair. And his nose is too wide.
Again, remember, this was the state's lead witness. Not only that, he was the only witness who claimed to have seen James Earl Ray at the time of the shooting. And you may be thinking, well, shouldn't there have been more people around that saw someone do something during this time? Oh, there were, they just didn't see James Earl Ray. One of those people was Stevens' wife, who said that she heard a shot not from inside of the building, but from just outside the building's window. She said that she heard a shot from outside, looked out, and saw, quote, a short man with salt and pepper hair in an army jacket and plaid shorts. At the same time this was happening, a cab driver who lived in that building said he was walking in after work for the day, and as he passed the hallway, he looked into the communal bathroom where the shot supposedly was taken. He walked a few more feet into his room, heard a gunshot from outside, and then sprinted outside to see what had happened. Considering that he looked into the bathroom possibly seconds before the shot went off, that completely clears the idea of James Earl Ray standing in the bathtub. Now, it was true that Ray owned a white Mustang. However, what that same cab driver reported as being weird is that whenever he pulled up to the house, there were two white Mustangs parked a couple hundred feet from each other. At first, Ray was trying to remove himself from any sort of guilt and said that during the actual shooting, he was at a nearby service station. However, in later stories, it seemed that he was serving as the getaway driver for a man known as Raul. Now, we'll get into the whole mess of Raul in a second, but for now, let's keep talking about James Earl Ray. After the shooting, Ray realized that he was on the run for the murder of MLK. However, he was being financed by someone only known to him as Fat Man. For those close to the case, it was no secret that James Earl Ray wasn't exactly the most dedicated of assassins, and the only reason he was able to escape from prison is he was loading shipment boxes onto a truck and one of the boxes was empty, so he just got inside and then they just put the lid and never checked, and that's how he got out. But according to those who knew Ray, the stories about him were wildly untrue. As a matter of fact, according to his family, Ray had a black girlfriend for some time, which greatly contradicts the stories of a racist Southern KKK member that the media afterwards portrayed him as. Not only that, but Ray knew comedically little about guns. Whenever Ray went to the gun shop because he was told by somebody that I'll explain later to buy a .30-06 Remington 760, he bought a .243 instead because he didn't understand how calibers worked. He then had to return the gun and get the same model of rifle. Keep in mind, this is the same guy that the FBI would later state was able to give himself several fake IDs and passports and elude the largest investigation in the United States history for 2 months straight. We'll talk about James Earl Ray's full story in a moment, but for now, I want to ask the question you're probably thinking, if not Ray, then who took the shot? Well, there were two people who were staring at Martin Luther King the exact moment he was shot. They were his chauffeur and his attorney who were talking to him. They were each watching him as he was leaned over the balcony the moment the shot was taken, and both of them said that as soon as he was hit, his entire body shot upwards. As a matter of fact, they each said that from the angle of the bathroom window, there was no way that they could have hit him in the lower right jaw, considering he was facing like this. Remember how I said Stephen's wife, who was staying in the boarding house, heard the shot from outside and then saw a man running by in the bushes? Well, she wasn't the only one. Reverend James Orange, who was with King at the moment of the shooting, said he looked over and saw in the bushes in front of the boarding house there was a plume of smoke that came up through the branches. Several other witnesses who were all walking the street at the time of the shooting said that they all heard a shot coming from the branches, and a couple people even reported seeing a man in a white shirt sprint around the back of the building.
Let's open it. This is
the building.
I interviewed Solomon Jones in the lobby of the St. Joseph Hospital approximately about 7:05. This was the story he told all of us. As soon as the shot was fired, he looked out over the limousine. He saw a sniper with a white sheet on his face duck back down into the bushes. A few seconds later, he rose out of the bushes without the sheet, walked to the wall, jumped down from the wall. And you must understand that other people were coming out of the fire station at the same time, jumping from the wall. Solomon said this person he saw in the bushes joined in with the people jumping from the wall, jumped from the wall, walked on the premises, and he said he was scared.
There was a firehouse located in the general vicinity of all of this, and one woman said that she saw a fireman trying to show police the bushes where he saw someone fire a gun and then run away from, but the police ignored him and ran inside. As a matter of fact, all of the witnesses who told police that they heard a gunshot come from outside were told that they were simply mistaken and it came from the bathroom window instead.
New York Times reporter Earl Caldwell was staying in motel room 215 when he heard the shot.
What I saw
This man just very clearly rise out of these bushes. He was in sort of a crouched, stooping position. I did not see a weapon in this man's hands, but I saw this figure directly across from the motel. And also, of course, the man in the bushes was a white man. From the day of the assassination until this day, no police, no FBI agent has ever come to me and said, "What did you see?"
And every single account that I've given you up until this point is either corroborated by several different witnesses or was in the official transcripts or what have you. But there's this one witness that isn't that reliable, but I have to mention. A hobo by the name of Harold Cornbread Carter, yes, his name was Cornbread, was drinking wine in the same bushes when he said he heard a shot, rolled over, and a man in a white shirt ran by him and then sprinted around the back of the building. I don't know how much I can put my faith in a man named Cornbread, but I wasn't going to not mention that. Speaking of the police misleading people, remember how I said there was a really big tree in the way of the bathroom that wouldn't have made any sense for someone to shoot directly through the tree to get to the Lorraine Motel? Well, the Memphis Police Department were up all night after the shooting, cutting down the trees in front of the boarding house to, quote, help with the investigation.
Growing diagonally through the window, and you couldn't even see the Lorraine Motel from that location. He said, I came back with crime scene in about an hour, and the whole tree had been cut down, and I found out there was a cut down order sent out to the sanitation department.
So there's this entire active crime scene, and for some reason the police decide to go out at 4 in the morning and just start cutting stuff with a chainsaw. As a matter of fact, the only report that day that a shot ever came from the bathroom of the boarding house was the drunk Stevens that I mentioned earlier. Every other person who was there that day reported the gunshot coming from outside in the bushes in front of the boarding house. So we've established that the official narrative is incredibly biased for some reason, and that James Earl Ray seems to be an incompetent patsy who just kind of stooped into this whole thing. Furthermore, it's the opinion of the King family, the attorneys, and everyone who was there that the official account is not what happened. So why so much cover-up, and why all of this hoopla over what could have been a simple try and cut assassination? And this is the part of the video where I want to emphasize that this is a joke, and if any of the names that I say correspond to real people, that I made the names up, and it is purely coincidental. So that being said, the FBI murdered Martin Luther King Jr. They murdered him so hard. I tried to go as long as I possibly could in this video without saying it, and it made me want to die, so let's fix that. During the time of a shooting, there was a black detective who was put on task of protecting Martin Luther King during his stay in Memphis, who was currently at home hiding. The reason he was hiding is because 2 hours before the shooting, someone called saying they were planning to murder him. It turns out that this report was entirely made up and came from no other than the FBI.
Lieutenant Larkin arrived and stated that I was wanted at headquarters. I said, for what? He said, I don't know, just get in the car, let's go. I was told to bring you back. Director, Frank Holloman, stated that the man standing across from me was Secret Service from Washington, stating that there was a contract out on my life. At that time, he told Lieutenant Larkin to take me home and wait until someone arrived to guard me. Once we arrived at my house, while seated in the car, awaiting the security for me, being there, I imagine, no more than 5 or 10 minutes, the radio blasted out Dr. King had been shot.
This departmental communication reveals that by 4:15 that afternoon, Lieutenant Arkin of the Memphis Police Department had been alerted by a phone call from the FBI that the assassination threat attributed to Reddit was a mistake. Alerted by a phone call from the FBI that the assassination threat attributed to Reddit was a mistake.
So the FBI made up a completely false story that this head detective that was protecting Martin Luther King needed to go home in order to avoid. Not only that, but a few minutes before King was shot, there was a bomb threat called in downtown Memphis that made the police focus their attention there instead of on MLK. Now, most often with events this large or assassinations that would cause this much noise, it is very rare that an actual member of a government party will carry out the assassination themselves. They almost always get fall guys to do it. And that's not even a conspiracy. Just look at historical cases like the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, where they got a bunch of teenage freedom fighters to carry out the work of politicians. So let's take a look at who some of those fall guys might have been. One of which being the guy I mentioned earlier as being sued by the King family, Lloyd Jowers. Remember how I said that the boarding house was located above a place called Jim's Grill? Well, Lloyd Jowers was the owner of Jim's Grill. The day after the shooting, a cab driver said that he was sitting in Jim's Grill whenever Lloyd told him to come look at what he has under the counter, to which he slid out a .30-06 rifle. Not only that, but whenever an investigator followed up on that lead, a waitress said that she was working the day of the shooting, heard a gunshot, and then Lloyd ran in the back room holding a rifle and had mud on the knees of his pants, implying that he was kneeled in the grass outside, to which he then took his rifle, wrapped it in a white sheet, set it under the counter, and when the police came by, said he didn't hear anything. Jowers' business partner by the name of Willie Adkins said years later that Jowers had confided in him and told him that he had a part in the King shooting and his job was to get rid of the rifle. And according to Adkins, Jowers passed the gun off to someone else who threw it off a bridge into a river. Jowers himself was a former member of the Memphis Police Department and still very close to several of the leading members of the department itself. He told Adkins that the reason he was given that job is because they trusted him and his business was directly across the street from the Lorraine Motel, which, if you'll remember, I mentioned earlier was so popular for having King stay there that they even named one of the rooms after him. Over the years, Jowers was pressured to come forward about his involvement in the murder, and finally in 1993 he went on ABC television and told them that he was paid $100,000 to help with the murder of Martin Luther King. More specifically, he said he was paid by known mob man Frank Liberto.
Jowers ran Jim's Grill across from the Lorraine Motel and claimed another Memphis businessman, Frank Liberto, paid him $100,000 to contract a killer.
What did Frank Liberto ask you to do? He asked me to handle some money transactions, hire someone to assassinate Dr. Martin Luther King.
See, Frank Liberto openly despised King. He had several different produce factories and manufacturing plants around the city of Memphis and said that King was making things harder because, those pesky workers, them and their human rights. The day of the shooting, John McFerrin was working at one of Liberto's produce plants when he heard Liberto answer the phone and say, quote, "I told you not to call me here. Shoot the son of a bitch when he comes on the balcony." Years later, a woman known as Lavada Atkinson was at a restaurant whenever Liberto got drunk and was trying to impress her and eventually said, "I'm the one who had MLK killed." Remember James Earl Ray's first lawyer, the one who pressured him to confess to killing MLK? Well, that lawyer, Percy Foreman, was a known affiliate of the Mafia and was very close to Frank Liberto.
I don't give a continental damn whether there was a conspiracy.
Well, Mr. Foreman, did you ever ask your client whether he was a part of a conspiracy, whether he'd been hired?
No, I never asked him that, but I asked him enough other questions to convince me that he was not.
Lloyd Jowers was also asked, well, if you were just the guy who got rid of the gun, then who actually shot Martin Luther King? To which Jowers said it was Memphis Police Department Lieutenant Earl Clark. Earl Clark had several accusations of taking bribes from gang members and was publicly a friend of Frank Liberto. Not only that, but he was the highest rated marksman on the Memphis Police Department. According to Jowers, as soon as the shot was taken, Clark sprinted down the hill, handed him the rifle so that he could then dispose of it, which, as I mentioned earlier, he brought it to the back door of the restaurant, while Clark jumped over a nearby wall and escaped in, you guessed it, a white Mustang. According to a janitor who worked at the Memphis Police Department, the night before the shooting, there was a meeting in the police chief's office between the police chief, the mayor of Memphis, Earl Clark, and another man by the name of Lieutenant Strausser. According to that same janitor, Strausser spent the entire day at the rifle range shooting his .30-06 over and over. Around the bushes of the boarding house, there were footprints of a size 13 shoe, and lo and behold, Strausser had a size 13 shoe. All of these assassinations, there's always a grassy knoll or some, a brambly bush that the actual killers hid in for some reason. I don't know what their aversion to buildings is. So to kind of summarize all of that, it seems that as part of this conspiracy involving the Memphis Police Department, two shooters, one most likely being the primary shooter and the other being a backup of Clark and Strausser, hid themselves in the bushes in front of the boarding house, took the shot whenever King walked out before having someone else ditch the guns as they got away in nearby getaway vehicles. So going off of all of that, one or two shooters placed in these bushes in between the boarding house and the motel went down, split most likely into two separate directions. One of them handed their weapon to Jowers, who then took it around this direction before carrying it into the back of the building that was connected to Jim's Grill and eventually disposing of the rifle. The shooter went this direction before interacting with a wall that was located over here, jumped over it, got into a getaway car, and then made his way down the street. Anyone else, a backup shooter or someone else set to get rid of the weapons, most likely followed a similar route, either getting into a getaway vehicle here, or as the cab driver reported, getting into one of the two white Mustangs that were located on a street between these two buildings. Either way, everyone in the investigation was focused on Ray leaving the window, going out of this building, and then getting away on this street, whereas there were several different avenues of escape left open to whoever the other conspirators might have been. So that's all well and good, but what's with this rifle that has James Earl Ray's fingerprints and him having rented the room in the house right above them, and all of this so perfectly falling in line for him to be the fall guy? Well, now that I've given you the official telling of the assassination as well as the unofficial but more widely believed telling of the assassination, let's get into James Earl Ray's story of what happened. And to do that, let's talk about James Earl Ray himself. At the end of World War II, James Earl Ray was part of the Office of Strategic Services, also known as the OSS. That organization then became the Central Intelligence Agency, or the CIA, after the war ended. James's brother said that he would never really talk about what happened while he was in the OSS and would only say cryptic things like they're kind of like the mafia. Once you join, you're never really allowed to leave. Specifically, James said that he was haunted by events that took place while he was in the OSS and later the CIA, and said that they would drug him and did other things to, quote, mess with my mind. This is kind of out of the scope for this video since I'm trying to talk about the specifics of King's assassination itself, but there are several that believe James Earl Ray was a part of the early MK Ultra experiments. Also, further on his backstory, his escape from the Jefferson City prison was weird, but this wasn't his first escape attempt. He had tried several times before, and every time he would just be administered medicine and then allowed to do it again. It's believed that Ray was one of many people kept on a leash by the government that they would let off if they ever needed them to commit whatever act that they couldn't have their hands directly tied to. Not only that, but shortly after completing this escape attempt that he definitely shouldn't have been able to get away with, his cellmate, who had told him to try to escape, was found hanging in his cell with his arms and legs broken.
The official story being that he hung himself and then broke his arms and legs. I don't even know how to tie that back into the whole conspiracy. That was what? It was shortly after escaping jail that he met the figure known as Raul. Despite the name and every description that was given of him, Raul was not Spanish, and it's not uncommon for operatives to have names that intentionally mislead those trying to look for them. This Raul seemed to be very generous to the escaped convict and began supplying Ray with money as well as fake IDs and passports so he could move from the United States to Canada. It was even Raul who gave Ray money and told him to go to Birmingham, Alabama and buy himself a nice car, to which Ray bought the white Mustang. According to Ray, Raul was a weapons dealer who was selling guns to Cuban militants who were hiding in the United States. Ray was sort of working as Raul's pseudo-business partner for a while, and then one day Raul told him that we're going to need about 200 rifles to sell to a group of these Cubans. He then asked Ray if he could go to Alabama and buy a rifle to show the Cubans as a preview of what the other 200 rifles are going to be like. That is when Raul told Ray to specifically purchase a Remington 760 in .30-06. To which, as I mentioned earlier, Ray went there, bought it in the wrong caliber, and then after showing Raul told him he had to take it back and get it exchanged for the right one. The day before Martin Luther King was assassinated, James Earl Ray said that Raul met him at Jim's Grill and said, "Tomorrow I'm meeting the Cubans in order to make this weapons deal. I need you to rent a room in the boarding house above this restaurant so that I can make the deal. And if anything goes wrong, I need you to be waiting outside to be my getaway driver so that I can get out of here if we need to." This is why there was an identical Remington 760 that had his fingerprints on it while wrapped in the bedsheet. This is the reason that despite renting the room in his name, James did not have any fingerprints on the bathroom or the room itself, and why he was waiting outside when, according to him, he heard a gunshot and Raul runs out, jumps in the back of the car, and he drives away. Ray believing that the deal went bad, someone got shot, and now he's trying to get out of there. According to Ray, he was on his way out of Memphis whenever he began to slow down the car. Raul jumped and rolled out of the back seat and ran away, and James never saw him again. From there, James drove all night till he hit Atlanta, where he said he met the before-mentioned Fat Man, who gave him a bunch of money and new passports so that he could be on the run for 2 months before being caught in England. And it wasn't until turning on his radio on the way to Atlanta that he found out that he had actually taken part in the killing of Martin Luther King Jr.
After a while, I got on a main street, and I was going to call this telephone number in New Orleans and find out if they could contact Raul and see if anything happened there, because I thought maybe being some guns around there, some type of raid or something. Well, anyway, when I was driving out there, they said something about, I had radio and said something about Martin Luther King had been shot. I didn't think too much about that, and then about 10 minutes later, when I was on the outskirts of Memphis, or maybe I was actually Mississippi, they said that they looked for a white man in a white Mustang in connection with the shooting, so I decided then that I'd better, move on out of there. I drove on and cut off and went to Atlanta, and from Atlanta I, went on to Canada, caught a bus.
It's time for a real fight song! Tailgate
Canada, caught a bus.
So, while that does tie up all the loose ends of why there was a bedsheet that some stranger supposedly dropped off that had Ray's fingerprints on it, and while that makes sense that he never touched the rooms that he rented, even though he did rent them, and while he was a getaway driver in the white Mustang at the time of it, and why there would have been 2 Mustangs, and blah blah blah, it makes everything make sense. That's still just the word of one escaped convict over, what, the entirety of the FBI's investigation? Well, it does line up everything cut and dry. We can't just take his word as being the truth. And the cool thing is, we don't have to. Daniel Ellsberg of Pentagon Papers fame swore on an affidavit that Agent Brady Tyson told him in confidence that it was J. Edgar Hoover who had Martin Luther King killed. If J. Edgar Hoover sounds familiar, that's because he was the director of the FBI during this time. More specifically, that Hoover had a right-hand man by the name of Clyde Tolson, who was known in the agency for carrying out Hoover's dirty work. That included getting mob members to carry out killings that the FBI couldn't handle themselves. Or more specifically, didn't want to be associated with handling themselves. According to this testimony of Agent Brady Tyson, it was Tolson who paid several informants to monitor Memphis at the time and figure out exactly where King would be staying. Not only that, but according to Ellsberg, Tolson paid off the warden at the Jackson City prison so that Ray would be able to escape. This makes sense as to why immediately after escaping, he met this really kind guy who just seemed to love him and gave him a bunch of money and fake passports. So several former agents, as well as James Earl Ray and those closely connected to the killings like the King family themselves, all believe the FBI to be the main culprit in this entire plot. And considering that it's believed Frank Liberto had many associations with the FBI in which he would carry out favors for them and they would look the other way on his operations. So it seems like the FBI, perhaps Tolson, had Liberto carry out the on-ground operations that it would take in order to have King killed. Also, this Raul guy, as well as Liberto and everyone else, connects to like the JFK assassination and also the Robert Kennedy assassination, but I won't get into that right now. In December of 1963, 1 month after JFK was killed, there was supposedly a meeting between Hoover and other high-ranking members of the FBI as to how they will have MLK taken care of. See, the FBI hated him for a whole slew of reasons. For one, people weren't exactly accepting of new ideologies at the time, and furthermore, King was causing issues for the established rule of how businesses and agencies were set up. Not only that, but this was at the height of the Russian panic or Red Scare thing, where everyone was super afraid of communism. And while King's ideas by today's standards are fairly moderate, his ideas of a sort of universal income or guaranteed health coverage and things like that were seen as super evil commie at the time. So the FBI wanted him out of the picture. As a matter of fact, they were so determined to find dirt on him that they began bugging his hotel rooms with hidden microphones. How did they do that? Well, they had the help of people like Marel McCullough, a former CIA operative who worked in South America, who was then moved into their early surveillance or COINTELPRO operations. McCullough was a close friend and member of King's inner circle, and it's believed that he was one of the people who began bugging his hotel rooms wherever he went. As a matter of fact, it's believed by many that he is the figure kneeling over the body of MLK right after he was shot.
In the famous Lau photograph of the associates of Dr. King pointing away from the motel and toward the rooming house, there was for a long time a mystery about the person who was kneeling over Dr. King checking him for life signs. That person was Marel McCullough, who somehow, when hearing the shot, instantly streaked up the stairs to the balcony and checked Dr. King. He was an undercover operative for the Memphis Police Department, but reporting directly to an intelligence officer of the Memphis Police Department.
Remember Lloyd Jowers that I mentioned earlier, the owner of Jim's Grill? Well, according to him, the day before the shooting, there was a meeting of conspirators in Jim's Grill that all had a part in the assassination. The meeting consisted of 5 men, and only 2 of them Jowers could identify. One of them was the aforementioned Police Lieutenant Earl Clark, the supposed shooter, and unbeknownst to Jowers at the time, one of those men was Marel McCullough. If all this is true, that would mean that McCullough was not only a close associate of King's, who was actually a government agent and bugging his hotel room, but that he was also part of the direct conspiracy to murder him and was at the meeting for it the day before. Using these hidden mics that were placed in King's hotel rooms, the FBI got information that they believe showed him as having extramarital affairs. Believing this to be a good way to hurt King's image as the reverend and civil rights leader, they wrote him an at-the-time anonymous letter that has come out several years later to have originated directly from the FBI. In this letter from the FBI, where the writer pretended to be a former supporter and fellow black man of King, they say in the intro, "King, in view of your low-grade, abnormal personal behavior, I will not dignify your name with either a Mr. or a Reverend or a Doctor. and your last name calls to mind only the type of king such as King Henry VIII and his countless acts of adultery and immoral conduct lower than that of a beast. Talk about an intro. After proceeding throughout the entire course of the letter to call King a fraud, it ends by saying, King, there is only one thing left for you to do. You know what it is. You have just 34 days in which to do. This exact number has been selected for a specific reason. It has definite practical significance. You are done. There is but one way out for you. You better take it before your filthy, abnormal, fraudulent self is bare to the nation. So if you ever think that the government didn't hate Martin Luther King, 4 years before his assassination, here's a letter where they literally told him to kill himself. The head of the Memphis Police Department at the time was a 25-year veteran of the FBI. And as a matter of fact, whenever he came to position, he said his number one goal was to make sure that the FBI and the MPD had a two-way street of communication. After the first march took place on March the 28th within Memphis, King decided that it was too dangerous to stay in room 306, as it was a large windowed room that opened up into an open street. He decided to change his room to room 202, that being a more secluded room facing away from the main road. However, before King got there, someone called the hotel and said that they were part of King's accompaniment and asked if they could have the room changed back to 306. By the time King got there, everything else had been booked, so he decided to just stick with room 306. However, that call ahead was not part of King's group, and as a matter of fact, no one has ever identified where the random caller came from. However, I can think of a couple people it could be, and they both start with FBI.
During the course of our investigation, we revealed the fact that the mission of the FBI was to destroy Dr. King. That is all documented in the course of our reports, and we did criticize him severely for the illegal, unconstitutional way in which his civil rights were violated.
Sleep. Oh.
Find buzzer beaters and cliffhangers in one place.
Constitutional way in which
after this video
his civil rights were violated.
Also, the day of the shooting, the FBI immediately took over the investigation, which made no sense because at the time it had nothing to do with anything outside of the state of Tennessee. It should have been a state issue. Even more weird, as soon as the FBI got MLK's body, they never performed an autopsy. Also, remember that book I mentioned earlier, He Slew a Dreamer? The book that had all the information about how James Earl Ray was a racist and how he just really wanted to kill King? Well, the author of that book was William Bradford Huey, and he was very close friends with, you guessed it, J. Edgar Hoover. Immediately after MLK's assassination, a high-ranking agent by the name of Cartha DeLoach put out a bulletin to Hoover saying that there's so much misinformation going around about the case that the FBI should quietly fund a book that would then allow there to be correct information about James Earl Ray and how racist and evil he was. Cartha DeLoach, that name sounds familiar. Oh yeah, and while we're going down the rabbit hole of suspicious stuff that happened around this, let's just keep going. The day of the assassination, whenever they were investigating the boarding house, Captain Ed Atkinson said that he overheard Earl Clark say to another police officer, "We're gonna have to cut the branches down. He couldn't have taken a shot from here." Which, if you'll remember, the branches mean a shot couldn't have been taken, and the MPD worked all night to make sure none were there. Also, Tennessee State Commissioner at the time, Harry Avery, began his own investigation to try to figure out how James Earl Ray, a supposed klutz of a convict, was able to amass so much money and get so many fake IDs, to which he was immediately fired by Governor Buford Ellington. A nurse who was at St. Joseph Hospital at the time that MLK was brought in said that he still had a pulse and they were attempting to resuscitate him before a group of men in suits came in and told them to step away from the body. As she was leaving the room, she turned around and said she saw the men take off King's life-saving equipment. And the only remaining doctor in the room who was with the men was the one who gave King the official time of 7:05 as being his time of death. And speaking of deaths related to this whole thing, let's talk about some of the weird ones. A cab driver by the name of Lewis Word, that's the third cab driver in this whole thing, anyway, said that the night of the shooting, he met with another friend of his named Buddy, who was a cab driver picking someone up from the Lorraine Motel whenever the shooting took place. Buddy said that he was looking at Martin Luther King whenever he was shot, and then turned to his left and saw someone run out of the bushes in front of the boarding house, scale a wall, and get into a vehicle and drive away. Lewis Ward said that a few days later he stopped at the cab agency to ask if anyone had seen Buddy because he hadn't heard from him in a while, and they said that Buddy jumped out of a moving car going down the highway and was immediately ran over and killed in a supposed suicide. They also said that before his death, the last time they saw him, he was trying to tell everyone the story of the shooter who was escaping the crime scene. Remember how I said earlier that despite all this, James Earl Ray couldn't get a retrial? Well, at first, he had a lawyer, Z.T. Osborne, the former lawyer of Jimmy Hoffa, come and say that he would try to get him a new case. 3 months after this, Osborne committed suicide, and his wife said that she never believed that he actually killed himself. Shortly after this, a judge said that he would look at the case because the evidence shows that Ray needs to be retried, and then he died of a heart attack. Another judge came in his place and says that Ray needs to be retried, and then he died of a heart attack. And then the third guy says, nope, no retrial, don't need it, he just leave him in there. A year after the assassination, Martin Luther King's brother, Alfred King, was also looking into all of the details of this, until he was found floating dead in his at-home swimming pool. The official story is that Alfred drowned. However, Alfred was a fantastic swimmer, and even more alarming, did not have any water in his lungs. He was also wearing just his underwear and had severe bruising around his neck, but the police decided that it was a drowning. In 1971, Bill Sater, a reporter who was looking into the whereabouts of this assassination, was asking questions in Waco, Texas, whenever his drink was poisoned and he died. 6 years after this, the FBI Assistant Director of Intelligence, William Sullivan, was set to testify against J. Edgar Hoover in the House Select Committee of Assassinations. However, a few days before he was set to testify against Hoover, he was shot in the middle of the woods by a man who, quote, mistook him for a deer. Also, that thing I just mentioned, the House Select Committee of Assassinations, if you remember in my JFK video, this was an entire committee put together that was made up of senators and other government members to determine if the JFK assassination and the MLK assassination was part of a conspiracy. The one real piece of evidence that they managed to get out of that was, remember how in the beginning I said that Ray was supposedly taking a bounty to kill King from 2 KKK members? Yeah, it turns out they were dead at the time that happened, so yeah, that's not true. However, the House Select Committee didn't come to the conclusion that MLK was definitely a conspiracy, but in 2012 it came out that the liaison that was giving them the information to review was actually a CIA agent. So in the committee that was put together to determine if the CIA killed MLK, it was determined that the CIA did not kill MLK because the evidence provided by the CIA said so. So to go ahead, cover all my bases, I do not want to unalive myself. I'm a great swimmer. I do not look like a deer. Is there anything else I'm missing?
You're a questionable swimmer.
Oh no. There was also a group of the CIA that was currently monitoring King at the time of the assassination, known as the 902nd Military Intelligence Group.
I just want to say, I'm a great swimmer. I don't look like a deer. I don't want to unalive myself. Unlike Mr. Goon, I am a good swimmer.
That was being led by a Colonel Downey. They had cameras set up everywhere, secret agents set up everywhere to see what would happen with King. Now, you would imagine that whenever the shooting happened, they would have like a picture or something. And according to one former agent, there were in fact several pictures of Jowers running down the hill and around to the back of Jim's Grill. Whenever they were asked for these pictures as part of evidence at the House Select Committee of Assassinations, they said that they got rid of all of them. That every picture they took of the day of the assassination disappeared and they dumped it. And isn't that convenient? So after all of that, do you see why Shelby County, Tennessee gave the King family $100? It was this information as well as personal accounts of witnesses and everything combined that led a jury to believe that, yeah, the government as well as several other agencies, including Lloyd Jowers, were a part of a larger conspiracy to kill Martin Luther King Jr. So take everything I just said as the evidence that the conspiracy occurred, compared to the evidence of James Earl Ray, which is one drunk guy's report and fingerprints on a gun that did not shoot the bullet. And most of the people who were involved in this whole thing are either dead or ineffective now anyway. Yet when we see people like Martin Luther King, who were so resolved to make a difference, that he garnered the hatred of those around him, and including the country that he resided in. While we may not be able to hold these people accountable in any court on earth, it is our job to better understand the past so that we can be more prepared for what actions come in the future.
And with that being said, that was the conspiracy theory, the conspiracy behind MLK's assassination. I'm ending stream. I hope you enjoyed watching the GameStar broadcast.